with Otto, his close associate. If you don't recall, Otto is the same guy who was friends with Andrea. Otto does not understand why Appin is delaying the alliance treaty, especially since the king himself supports it. The church remains a serious threat. They cannot afford to sit idly by. Appin reminds Otto that they were originally meant to align with Timothy, not Roland. Otto argues that they should support the rightful king of Greycastle. The ambassador's message confirms Roland's legitimacy. However, the prince silences him, assuring Otto that he will handle the matter and warning him not to interfere. Otto, unwilling to let the issue drop, insists that they must take action against the church. His persistence earns him a cold glare from the prince. Fear grips Otto. He quickly swallows his argument and promises to hold his tongue. In a chilling tone, Appin asks if they are still friends. Otto replies that they are. Not only him, but Belinda and Oro are also part of their friendship circle. Appin follows up with a heavy question. If something were to happen to the king, would Otto support him as the next ruler? Trapped by the weight of their friendship, Otto has no choice but to agree. Once alone, Otto feels deeply unsettled by the changes in Appin. When the king fell ill, Appin seemed devastated. However, he has recently regained his composure, but he is different now. Otto knows the prince well. Appin was never the type to seek power at any cost. He decides to seek out help from his friends, hoping they can uncover the truth behind Appin's transformation. Meeting Oro, who is training with his sword, Otto directly states his concern. Oro, however, is uninterested. Appin is the prince, the future king basically, and Oro is sure that he will never remain their friend forever. Besides, Appin is a grown man now. If he is throwing a tantrum, Oro sees no reason to entertain it. Otto reminds him of their long-standing friendship, but Oro snaps. Ever since Andrea's supposed death, their friendship was broken beyond repair. That is when Otto reveals the truth that Andrea is alive. Shocked, Oro demands immediate answers. Otto explains that he saw her in Bordertown, under Roland Wimbledon's protection. She turned out to be a witch, and Roland shelters witches in Greycastle. Her death was a ruse orchestrated by her father to protect her. Now more than ever, Otto believes they must pull Appin back. Dawn must ally with Roland to defeat the church. If they do not, and the church attacks alone, they may never see Andrea again. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Oro finally understands. The two friends clasp hands, ready to do whatever it takes in order to preserve their long-shared friendship. Later we meet Yorko, who finally makes it to his room, only to get spooked by Fox. Yorko demands to know what emergency made Fox sneak into his room just to scare the hell out of him. Fox reveals that Wolfheart refugees are pouring into Dawn, and it's a great opportunity to recruit people. He suggests that Yorko treat it as a business deal, focusing on buying craftsmen, those who are literate, and those with special skills. The money he spends will be reimbursed by Roland. What's more, for every person they recruit, His Majesty Roland will pay 5 silvers. But Yorko makes it clear that he has no head for business. When he chatted with Denise, it was only to get her to talk. He has no interest in running around and buying people. Besides, the slave trade mainly happens on the border between the two countries, and since he's supposed to be an ambassador, how is he supposed to explain going there? Fox reminds him that this is His Majesty's plan. Yorko doesn't have to leave Radiant City. Some slaves will inevitably be brought here to be sold. The price might be a little higher, but they can afford it, and the initial filtering will already be done. As for not having a head for business, Fox suggests he ask Miss Denise for help. She's a well-known noble merchant, and transporting refugees to Greycastle wouldn't be difficult for her. Establishing a transport route would benefit them in the long run, and if they ever run into danger, they could just disguise themselves as small-time traders and retreat safely. Yorko is genuinely amazed at how much Fox seems to know about these affairs. Fox bluntly tells the pleasure seeker that while he was out mingling, Fox was out gathering information on the streets. By now, Yorko is forced to admit that while Fox is a capable knight, he's just as much a capable businessman. But the man makes it clear that he is neither a knight nor a businessman. However, he is willing to protect Yorko if the need arises. After all, Yorko's safety is something His Majesty Roland entrusted him with. As for his own identity, he's nothing more than a simple circus worker. The scene shifts to Neverwinter City, where poor Barov is drowning in a flood of requests from different departments, completely overwhelmed. But he's not alone in this mess. Beside him is Iris, sent by His Majesty Roland to learn a thing or two about how the city hall operates. She is already done with the first task Barov assigned to her, meticulously laying everything out with no room for mistakes. Internally, Barov is amazed by her mannerisms and intelligence. He's so impressed that he's literally eyeing her as a potential candidate for His Majesty Roland's wife. If Iris successfully establishes a provincial city hall in the north, that would be a great achievement. But if things keep progressing in the right direction and she excels in her role, Barov fears she might eventually replace him. To avoid this fate, he decides to teach her that city hall work isn't so easy to grasp. King Roland needs a minister who can see the bigger picture. So, he bombards her with an extremely complex problem and asks for her solution. In his mind, controlling the big picture requires experience in administration and a deep understanding of the city's unique traits. No amount of talent or prior experience could allow her to know this city like the back of her hand. But to his shock, she comes up with a solution that completely blows his mind. The plan she proposes is not only clever, but also so daring that even he wouldn't have thought of it. Later that night, Iris returns to her room, where she finds her brother, Carl, reading a book he bought from the local market. It's like a painting, but it has a story too, making it quite entertaining to read. Seeing her in such an upbeat mood, Carl wonders if she has no intention of returning. She reminds him that she's still waiting for their father's response. Once their father replies, Roland will let Carl return home, but she plans to stay longer. Carl asks if it's the city hall that wants her to remain. She clarifies that it's not the city hall itself, but Roland Wimbledon's administration. She then tells Carl that she will be sending a letter to their father soon enough. The scene transitions to the northern region, where Duke Carlin throws a tantrum after reading the letter Iris sent. The source of his distress is His Majesty Roland's plan to strip the aristocracy of their governing power. Usually Iris has always helped Carlin stay one step ahead, but this time, he feels like she has completely handed them over to Roland. To make matters worse, she even told him to avoid resistance and accept the situation. Her choice of words makes Carlin sound like a criminal. For a moment, he's certain she's trying to rebel against him. If he submits to Roland, the Candle family will lose its ruling power over the border region. Just when he thought he could enjoy total control after getting rid of the Holmes and Lista families, he's back to square one. At the same time, he dreads the consequences of refusing to submit to Roland. Iris had made it clear in her letter that if their father refused to submit, both she and Carl would be doomed. Roland would imprison them forever, just like the heir of Duke Ryan. She could already imagine countless ways he could humiliate her, and once he was done with her, he'd throw her into the dungeons or the military barracks, destroying the so-called Northern Pearl forever. To intimidate her father further, she urged him to think about his own fate as well. Before long, Roland's armies would descend upon the north, and she was willing to bet that his vassals and knights wouldn't last even half a day. If he resisted, he wouldn't just lose his title, he wouldn't even be able to live as a normal citizen, much less a duke. Basically, she was trying to convince her father by showing her own fear of the worst. She wanted him to send an official letter of loyalty to express their cooperation. Along with that, she asked him to send literate servants to learn the city hall's governing system so they could familiarize themselves with the new laws. Since Iris had already made her decision, Carlin saw no choice but to trust her plan and pledge his loyalty to His Majesty Roland. But as a duke, he still wanted to rely on his last trump card, offering Iris as the next queen. He would include this condition in his letter of loyalty. The scene transitions to Dragon's Cliff, where Iron Axe launches an attack with the First Army in formation. Their objective is to take down Spear Passie's worthless brother and reclaim her territory. Iron Axe asks her what she intends to do with the traitor knights and the servants who sided with her brother. Without hesitation, she makes it clear that they are no longer her knights if they chose to betray her, and she wants them to pay for it. He then asks her what she plans to do with Redwyn Passie, her brother. He reminds her that His Majesty's orders were to send all elite rebels to Neverwinter, except for her family. Everyone else who resists will be executed. However, she has the choice of what happens to her brother. For now, it seems like Spear Passie hasn't decided yet. The battle erupts, and after a brutal clash, she emerges victorious, reclaiming her land by utterly defeating her brother. When she finally stands face to face with him, the bastard still has the audacity to spew nonsense, calling her a witch, a devil's claw. Paranoid from his defeat, he throws every insult in the book at her, even going so far as to claim she's just an adopted child. But his words have no effect on Passie. In fact, she welcomes the idea. If she were adopted, that would be even better. She has no desire to be associated with a scum brother like him. She turns on her heel to leave, but not before ordering the knights to take Redwyn Passie to Neverwinter City. Since he's lost, he is just a lost cause. He's better suited for hard labor in the mines. With that, she walks away. As she moves through the corridor, she takes in the ruins of her town and silently wishes for Dragon's Cliff to prosper under Roland's rule. The scene shifts to Neverwinter, where the skies rumble with thunder, a clear sign that summer is here. The weather seems unforgiving. Roland is relieved that it didn't rain 3 days ago. Otherwise, one of his plays, The City of Love, wouldn't have had its outdoor performance. Fortunately, the remodeled plaza was spacious enough, and Echo's ability had taken the performance to the next level. Even Roland, despite having watched many high-production films in the past, was deeply moved by the performance. He had no doubt that the song she sang, the Song of Unison, had a profound effect on everyone who heard it. Suddenly, Barov bursts into Roland's office with good news for once. It's a rare sight. Usually, every time he steps into the office, he's already out of breath and rattling off the worst possible scenarios. Baroff reveals that the latest real estate statistics have been calculated, and the results are just as Roland expected. After the performance of the City of Love, the number of people submitting requests for rentals and home purchases has surged. Even marriage registrations have increased significantly. Roland feels proud upon hearing this. He further emphasizes that the theater is not just for entertainment, it serves as a tool for emotional stability. Beyond promoting the pride of labor and construction, it also strengthens social bonds. His next plan is to expand efforts to accept more refugees. A thriving population is Neverwinter's greatest resource for development, and it takes priority over many other matters. He then instructs Baroff to summon Scroll, as he has something important to discuss with her. Soon enough, Scroll arrives in his office, responding to the summons. Roland wastes no time getting to the point. He intends to expand the education department's reach and include the newly arrived refugees in the system. However, Scroll is hesitant. At the moment, they lack enough teachers and classrooms. To accommodate the new influx, they would need to double or even triple their current staff. But Roland already has a plan to ease the burden on teachers by having students teach themselves. His idea is simple. Public classes will be held once a week for basic literacy, and the rest of the time, students will practice writing and recognizing words using workbooks. There will be no grades, tests, or formal requirements. Everything will depend on the individual's willingness to learn. Scroll, however, is skeptical. Without supervision, she doubts that even 1 in 10 students will succeed in learning properly. But Roland doesn't mind. His goal is simply to give them a chance. There will always be people dissatisfied with low salaries, and to prevent them from making poor decisions, he feels it is his duty to provide them with a way to improve themselves. Offering a legitimate path for the lower classes to rise is essential to maintaining the energy of a new government. Outside, the rain has finally stopped after pouring all night. A new day begins. Wendy attempts to wake Nightingale, but she remains in a deep slumber, oblivious to Wendy's calls. Deciding not to disturb her further, Wendy heads off to breakfast. After eating, she meets with her little students. She inquires about the sales of the first volume of Witch Diaries. One of the girls eagerly reports that the book has been a hit. Everyone is fascinated by the stories of Bordertown's angels, especially the First Army soldiers. People come to buy copies every day. In the past week alone, they have sold around 60 copies. At this rate, they'll sell out all 1,000 initial copies within half a month. Wendy is pleasantly surprised by these numbers. While they may seem modest on paper, they are impressive for a town where food is the top priority. Witch Diaries is purely for entertainment. It doesn't help with studies, nor does it feed people. And it's not cheap either. It's time for them to start brainstorming ideas for the next volume. Luckily, Roland has already chosen the protagonist for the second book, Sister Echo. The title will be The Silver Moon Princess from the Southern Lands of Sand and Fire. Wendy finds herself looking forward to the day Roland conquers the southern region and finally visits Echo's homeland, an endless desert. Her role is to spread awareness about witches and reveal their true nature to the people. Echo, on the other hand, has firmly established herself in the theater, where the actors absolutely love her music. Meanwhile, Evelyn has opened a pub near the Holy Mountain Hotel, selling all sorts of unique liquors. Her drinks have become unforgettable to both locals and tourists alike. Rumor has it that Hummingbird will soon join City Hall as the Vice Department head of the construction department, making her the second witch to hold an official position after Scroll. As everyone works hard to build Neverwinter City, public perception of witches is also beginning to change. One day, they will be seen as equals. The scene shifts to the Kingdom of Dawn. Oro and Otto sneak around the king's residence, moving carefully through the shadows. Otto is anxious, fearing they might get caught. Sneaking into His Majesty's residence is strictly forbidden, but Oro insists this is necessary if they are to accomplish their goal. In fact, Oro still can't believe he used Andrea's whereabouts as leverage to demand help from Lord Quinn, her father. They burn through a sewer cap using acid and proceed inside. This passage is actually an old escape tunnel. Otto knows it like the back of his hand. He and Oro used to explore the castle through it during their childhood. Eventually, they reach the end of the tunnel, which leads directly to the fireplace in the king's chamber. Inside, they find His Majesty lying in bed. Appin is also present. Soon enough, 2 pure witches enter the room, joining Appin. If anyone had forgotten, the blonde one is Isabella, while the veiled woman is literally named Viel. They claim to have the medicine that can cure the king, but they refuse to hand it over unless Appin fulfills their unreasonable demands. And even if he manages to get the medicine, there's one condition. It will only work if the Pope is the one to administer it. The mention of the Pope catches Oro off guard, leaving him sweating bullets. From what Oro and Otto understand, these women are not alchemists sent to cure the king. They are pure witches, exactly like the ones Roland had warned them about. Veal reminds Appin of the orders he had received a month ago to shut down all roads leading to Wolfheart. Yet, for some reason, refugees are still pouring into the kingdom. She coldly points out that even if these people crawled their way to the border, they should have reached it by now. Appin tries to explain that there are simply too many of them. If they are stopped at the border, most of them will starve to death. There are no nearby cities or settlements capable of providing food, and if the refugees are forced to turn back, it will take at least a week to return to Moortown. By then, many will perish. But Veal remains indifferent. As far as she is concerned, if these people are abandoning their kingdom, they deserve to die, whether by starvation or dehydration. She would rather Appin focus on saving his father's life instead of worrying about breaking their agreement. With no other options, Appin reluctantly agrees to shut down all roads within the next week. However, if refugees manage to cross through the mountains or forests, he won't take responsibility for them. Isabella, at least, agrees not to force him to do something beyond his control. Satisfied, Veal picks up the medicine bottle, drinks it herself, and then pours it into the king's mouth through her own. With that, Isabella promises that he will wake up in an hour, like usual. Veal once again reminds him that as long as Appin follows orders, King of Dawn will be healed, and even healthier than before. Isabella also mentions that the next time they come will be when he completely shuts down the border, so she hopes he won't disappoint the Pope. The poor guy is totally frustrated, cornered by these filthy women. From what he understands, he's sure they're witches, which is why they fed the medicine through their mouths, in order to fuse it with magic. He finds it hard to believe that the church has witches, and what's worse is that whatever the church is doing is no different from demons. In the next moment, he signals his knights, and they pour into the area, completely surrounding them. Veal just calls this attempt utterly futile, saying the prince seems to take the church too lightly. But the prince, on the other hand, feels smug. They have stones of divine judgment all around the castle and everything. To the prince's despair, however, his soldiers unalive themselves. Oro decides to butt in, but Otto stops him. They can't get inside. The mechanism can only be triggered from within. Veal steps toward Appin, who slumps to the ground, recoiling in fear. The witches, on the other hand, seem disappointed that he still doesn't know how to follow orders. Still, they assure him that his father will be fine, and the Kingdom of Dawn will continue to exist for a while longer. Once the church takes Grey Castle, she plans to take Appin under her wing. While they will eventually take the Kingdom of Dawn, they promise to let Appin enjoy the luxurious lifestyle he craves. The citizens of Dawn will also be spared from the horrors of war. As they leave, they tell him to clean up the room as his father might be terrified to see this horrific sight. Otto and Oro finally take a moment to breathe. This encounter has taught them that witches aren't affected by the stones of divine punishment, and the church is planning to take Grey Castle and then Dawn, treating the four kingdoms like a feast, just as His Majesty Roland had described. Otto decides to reveal everything they saw to their fathers, as well as Lord Quinn, but Oro is against it. They just saw firsthand that the stones of divine judgment are useless against pure witches, meaning their families would be in danger. Otto, however, is confident that His Majesty Roland will help them. All they have to do is find the Grey Castle ambassador and relay the message. We then transition to Bordertown, where Prince Roland chuckles as he reads Duke Carlin's loyalty letter. One page is dedicated to pledging loyalty to Roland, but the 10 or so following pages are all praise for Iris, her beauty, her talents. He's basically describing her as the best woman for the position of queen. Essentially, this letter is more or less a marriage request. Roland just chuckles at the sight as he doesn't need a political marriage to secure his throne. Then he receives a pigeon carrying a letter. Once he opens it, he realizes it's from Ambassador Yorko of the Kingdom of Dawn. And what he reads is quite shocking. The Dawn Castle has been infiltrated by pure witches, and these pure witches are immune from the stones of divine judgment. The first prince, Appin, tried to resist, and his soldiers ended up committing suicide under the witches' control. The church's goal is to hold Dawn in place while they attack Grey Castle first. Oro, Toccata, and Otto Lux witnessed Prince Appin's failed attempt against those pure witches, and now their families are seeking Roland's assistance. A profound change occurs in Roland's mood after hearing the news. The idea of witches being immune to the stones of divine judgment sounds terrifying. Nightingale reminds him that only transcendent witches with strengthened bodies or high-tier devils like magic slayers have that kind of resistance. Roland, on the other hand, decides that he's going to adjust his plans for conquering the southern region. Later, we see him in a conference with all the core members, planning how to proceed with the conquest. Iron Axe brings up replacing the First Army soldiers stationed at Dragon's Cliff with newer recruits. The aristocrats shouldn't be too much trouble, while the First Army should focus on taking on the church's forces. Roland agrees with this approach, but he has two major concerns. First, they don't know when the enemy will attack. Second, they don't know where it will happen. The church used to have only one path to attack Grey Castle, from the northern region all the way down to the capital. But now that they have the Dawn King in their grasp, The Divine Punishment Army might attack from the Dawn border as well, so he asks if anyone has any suggestions. Barov argues that no matter where they come from, they'll have to pass through the northern region first, which is Duke Carlin's territory. So he suggests having Miss Iris relay this information to her father and station herself in the north to watch for enemies. Iris agrees that keeping watch is important, but she points out that it's not an efficient plan. If the enemy is already at their doorstep, it would be difficult to buy more time. Roland then asks if she has a better solution, to which she suggests sending people to Hermes. This idea leaves a few people in the room stunned. Sending spies to the church's holy city sounds ridiculous. Even if they made it inside, it's not like the Pope would announce their invasion. The place is filled with church followers, making infiltration nearly impossible. But Iris reminds them that they don't need to enter the holy city. All they need to do is negotiate with the merchants near it. She then directs everyone's attention to the map and points out Hermes' unique geography. She highlights a particular slope by the mountains. The old holy city was below, while the new one was built on the plains above. The environment there is incredibly harsh. While it's harder for demons to attack, the living conditions are terrible, making farming impossible. That means Hermes must source food from elsewhere. Every fall, dozens of caravans arrive from all 4 kingdoms to provide resources, turning the old holy city into a marketplace, almost like a small town. The church maintains order there, and merchants frequently pass through. In other words, if the church starts sending large armies of divine punishment soldiers, the merchants will know immediately. While the room is rocked by Iris's quick thinking, Knight Carter is shocked by her intelligence. Roland also approves of her plan, and now he understands why she's called the Northern Pearl. Iris then turns to Roland and expresses her desire to see his army in action. She has always been intrigued by how he managed to siege the capital in just one day. If she can understand the First Army's combat style, she might be of use in the coming conflicts. Meanwhile, Sylvie believes they should contact Miss Tilly, as the witches of Sleeping Island might also be able to help. Roland is reluctant to rely on Tilly's aid, knowing that Sleeping Island is already dealing with internal conflicts. However, Sylvie is right. If they want the best chance at defeating the mysterious pure witches, they need the help of other witches. So, he decides to write her a letter. Agatha also reminds him not to forget to equip all mortals with stones of divine judgment. During the time of the Alliance, there were witches with incredible power, and mortals without stones were completely helpless against them. But Barov raises a concern. Where will they get enough stones in such a short time? That's when Roland reveals his plan. He intends to take the stones from the church itself. Instead of waiting for the enemy to strike, he plans to locate them first, like snapping the fangs off a venomous snake. Later, we see Wendy gathering the other witches to break the news. The church is coming. For a moment, a heavy gloom settles over the room. But one by one, the witches promise to do their part to contribute to the war. Moon vows to generate as much electricity as she can, while Evelyn promises to produce as much liquor as possible. Wendy can see that everyone is anxious about the looming war ahead, but no one seems to be backing down. Their belief probably stems from the fact that His Majesty has never lost a single battle. This war is critical for the Witch Union's future. Wendy is certain that if His Majesty obliterates the church, the entire kingdom, or even the whole continent, will finally be safe for witches to live in. And in Roland's territory, they will create a new world where witches and commoners share equal status and honor. For now, Wendy insists that everyone keeps working as usual, just as Roland has always taught them. With courage in her heart, Wendy is sure that no one can defeat them. This is their home, and this is the turning point in changing the fate of witches. And so, all of the witches stack their hands together, vowing to overcome any hurdles in their way. Later, Wendy meets Nightingale, who seems unusually tense about the upcoming war. Nightingale has waited a long time for this moment, to finally face the church head-on. The sisters they lost to the church's hands have also been waiting for this day. As always, Wendy comforts her friend, pulling her into a passionate hug that melts the worries right off Nightingale's face. Meanwhile, the grain seized by the First Army from Dragon's Cliff quickly replenishes Neverwinter's inventories, ensuring enough rations for the upcoming war. The new recruits will soon finish their basic training, and raiding the church for stones shouldn't be too difficult. Roland is confident that 1,500 soldiers will be more than enough for the operation. However, he knows they're likely to encounter pure witches during this mission. That's why the contributions of Evie and Sylvie will be absolutely critical. Captain Brian approaches Roland, still struggling to determine the best location for battle. He believes the First Army can only reach its full potential if they attack from the western region. The Navy would be able to provide solid backup, ensuring supply replenishments within a single day. This distance would also be a huge disadvantage for the church, as their forces would run out of food within a month. But Roland doesn't believe that Brian's plan will work. There are still many church followers in Grey Castle, and without any word from the Pope, they will continue to bring in as many supplies as they can carry. Iris also believes that the church possesses berserker pills, substances capable of transforming ordinary people into monstrous warriors. If the church starts losing, they might force the citizens of Grey Castle to consume these pills, turning them into weapons to weaken the First Army. The objective is the most important part of any battle, and if we don't achieve it, then even a victory becomes a loss. She argues that Roland needs every citizen in Grey Castle alive. They cannot allow the church to massacre the kingdom's people. Brian is startled by her words. As far as he understands, she is suggesting they launch an attack on the enemy before they even enter Grey Castle. He reminds her of the consequences. If their soldiers run out of ammunition, resupplying won't just take a day or two. Iris admits that she doesn't fully understand the artillery and firearms that Neverwinter uses, but she does know that no battle should come at the cost of innocent civilians. That's when Roland suggests focusing troops and supplies on the border cities first. This way, they can minimize transportation issues and avoid fighting within Grey Castle itself. But Captain Brian is still unsure. How will they know where the church will attack from? Roland proposes baiting them into attacking a specific location. If they can determine when the enemy will strike, they should be able to detect their preparations in nearby cities. The answer is Blizzard Cliff. If they pile up supplies there and station the First Army at Valleytown, which is nearby, the church will be drawn into attacking along that route. Brian asks why they would choose Blizzard Cliff. Iris explains that it's because Blizzard Cliff is too close to the Holy City. Instead of waiting for the church to attack, they should act as if they are preparing an offensive. This will pressure the enemy into falling back toward that position. But Brian questions what happens if the church refuses to take the bait and chooses another route instead. Roland's response is simple. Then the holy city of Hermes will be annihilated. The next scene takes us into Anna's twisted nightmare. She sees buildings burning, flames surging wildly, a result of her own witch powers. Then, she is slapped by her father across the face. Anna jolts awake, gasping. It looks like this is not the first time she's had this dream. Later, she meets Wendy and her little helpers. She proceeds to hand Wendy this month's salary, 2 golden royals. Later, she gives a single coin to Knight Carter, who, in turn, delivers it to Anna's father. The reason Carter is delivering the money is because Anna refuses to meet him. She knows exactly how he'll act, just as he always did. And if she sees him now, it will only create more trouble for Roland. She doesn't want to add to his burdens. Knight Carter later reports back to her after completing the task, and Anna expresses her gratitude. She also instructs him not to tell Roland about this. Later, we see Sister Molly and Honey exploring Bordertown together. They are absolutely fascinated by how much the town has changed in just one winter. After spending a wonderful time together, they can only wish for one thing, that Miss Tilly would come to Bordertown and live here with them. If that happened, they could all live here happily, forever. The armies are ready to sail, and everything is going according to plan. Once they secure enough stones of divine judgment, the leading squad will first head to the northern region. Eventually, all 4,500 troops will rendezvous at Valleytown, forcing the church to attack Blizzard Cliff. Iris assures Roland that she will write to her father, requesting that he provide half of the northern region's stored rations for the soldiers. She also promises that the ruler of Valleytown will fully cooperate with anything the First Army requires. Roland curiously inquires if she does not plan to return, to which she expresses her intentions to follow the First Army in all its subsequent battles. She entrusts her brother to Roland's care, and he promises to look after him. Grateful for his kindness, she assures him that when the time of battle arrives, she will be waiting in Valleytown. Once she departs, setting sail with the First Army, Nightingale appears beside Roland. He asks if everything the woman said was genuine. Nightingale confirms that there was nothing deceitful. Her loyalty and combat knowledge were at least truthful. With this reassurance, Roland returns to the castle. In his office, he studies the map, noting that the western region now has an oceanside dock. His next step is to contact the infrastructure department to construct buildings, storage spaces, and a temporary port. He also orders an increase in coke oven production. Suddenly, Maggie arrives carrying a letter from Princess Tilly. Whatever is written inside demands immediate attention. Without hesitation, Roland instructs Maggie to take Sylvie and chase after the departing ships, delivering Tilly's message to Evie. At sea, the First Army. On board the ships, Iron Axe and Brian strategize their next move. Brian suggests blasting the cannons upon reaching the port, but Iron Axe warns that this could provoke hostile attention from the local ruler. Their primary target is the church, and other matters should be secondary. He decides to proceed with diplomacy first, delivering the necessary documents and following protocol. Iris volunteers to go, explaining that the Candle family is one of the great families of the northern region, and her father is a duke, making her a suitable ambassador. Brian expresses concerns for her safety, while Iron Axe advises her to take a squadron of soldiers as a precaution. If they hear gunfire, they will launch an attack. Upon landing, Iris proceeds into the city, where Baron Delta, the ruler of Redwater City, arrives to escort the delegation. Later, Iron Axe meets with the Baron and states their objective. The church is attempting to consume all 4 kingdoms, and rebellion is now inevitable. He reminds the Baron of the disasters at Everwinter and Wolfheart. Their goal is simple: destroy the church and leave. However, the Baron acts suspiciously, insisting there is no need to rush. He invites them to a grand banquet at the castle that evening, hoping everyone will attend. While Iris expresses gratitude for his generosity, she reminds him that they must first fulfill His Majesty's orders. As the army continues its march, an ominous presence suddenly descends upon the area. Sensing danger, Iron Axe commands full mobilization. Just then, Maggie and Sylvie appear, warning them of an impending threat. Sylvie has detected magic in the area. At that moment, the Baron's knights suddenly turn on the first army. Chaos erupts as the Baron himself is struck by a massive rock, thrown by a witch with the power to hurl boulders. Iron Axe immediately gives the order to open fire. Soldiers unload their bullets, killing the witch on the spot. As she falls, the magic Sylvie had sensed dissipates. Brian reflects bitterly on how the church not only forces commoners into consuming berserker pills, but also secretly trains witches, ruining their lives. Nevertheless, Iron Axe reaffirms their mission. Following Roland's orders, they storm the church, eliminating the hooded figures inside. Inside the treasury, they uncover a hoard of valuable items. The scene shifts to Slumber Island, where Madame Heidi appears for the first time. It has been 2 months since Evie and Softfeather left, yet no news has arrived. She fears something terrible may have happened. She reflects on how her position on the island has become increasingly precarious. Ever since Tilly established the slumber spell, all non-combat witches have sided with her. Those useless individuals are now beginning to stand on equal footing with battle witches, a fact that frustrates Heidi. Just then, her subordinate Skyfire rushes in with urgent news. A new witch has arrived on the island. Her name is Annie. Skyfire fears that Annie is the same girl they encountered years ago, the one who had traveled with Evie. She recalls spotting Annie on a stretcher. She is certain that Annie is the same girl Bloodfang once rejected while taking Evie instead. Heidi gets furious and rebukes Skyfire for failing to take care of Annie when they first met. Skyfire insists she did her part and cannot explain how Annie has resurfaced. From what I can understand, Heidi secretly hands over support witches to the church, while keeping battle witches for herself. If Annie is alive and well, it could expose Heidi's dealings with the church. Heidi demands to know why Annie was brought in on a stretcher. Skyfire explains that Annie has a severe case of frost illness, and Deborah is already tending to her. Unsettled, Heidi orders Skyfire to summon Nightfall and instruct Sandstorm to investigate Annie's condition. Since Sandstorm has never met Annie before, she will not be recognized. Later, Sandstorm reports back, Annie is unconscious and the frost illness has spread to her lungs. She won't recover in just a day or 2. However, rumors suggest that a witch in Grey Castle's western regions possesses the ability to cure any illness. Once the rainstorms subside, Annie is to be sent there. This infuriates Heidi. She turns to Nightfall and asks if she can ensure that Annie sleeps forever. Nightfall hesitates but confirms that it is possible. When she inquires why it is necessary, Heidi dismisses the question, simply stating that Annie is a traitor to Bloodfang. Under Heidi's menacing glare, Nightfall quickly agrees to follow through. Heidi instructs her to cast her magic now, and it should only trigger when Annie is aboard the mermaid ship. With that, they decide to carry out the plan. Later, she and her entourage approach Camilla, demanding to see the new witch. Camilla, however, reminds them that Annie has already been put to sleep and should not be disturbed. But Heidi keeps insisting, claiming that they know someone named Annie already. She fabricates a story, stating that Annie may have been separated from Bloodfang during an escape from an island. Left with little choice, Camilla grants them permission to see Annie. Once they finally get inside, Heidi tries to distract Camilla while Nightfall attempts to cast her spell in secret. However, Camilla sees through the trick immediately and stops Nightfall before she can complete the incantation. The spell Nightfall was about to use, the Seed of Eternal Rest, is a dangerous magic capable of putting someone into an unending sleep. Thanks to Camilla's intervention, the magic misfires and harmlessly dissipates into the ground. Realizing their plan has failed, Heidi quickly casts a spell of her own to obliterate Camilla. But to her shock, she only destroys a hologram, a mere projection of the real Camilla. At that moment, Skyfire unleashes a fiery attack to clear the path ahead and makes a break for it. But before their escape can be successful, they find Ash standing outside, blocking their way. Alongside her are several witches, including Andrea. The battle is swift. One by one, the Bloodfang members are subdued by Andrea and Ash. The next morning, Ash and Andrea report the capture of the Bloodfang group to Princess Tilly and await her decision. Tilly looks distraught to realize that everything Roland had warned her about in the letter turned out to be true. She can't help but feel sorrowful. Why must witches always be forced into conflict? According to Evie, Most of the Bloodfang witches were unaware of Heidi's secret agenda. They had simply followed her without knowing the full extent of her schemes. After careful consideration, Tilly makes her decision. She will gather all the Bloodfang witches, including Heidi, and take them to the western region. There, they will face the Divine Punishment Army, the Judgment Army, and the Pure Witches. Tilly firmly believes that, just as Roland had said, if they can defeat the church once and for all, witches will finally enjoy true freedom. Even if Roland were not her brother, she would still stand by his side, for he has been helping her all along. Turning to Ash and Andrea, she asks if they are willing to accompany her on this mission. The answer is immediate. Both witches are more than ready to fight alongside her. Andrea, in particular, is already daydreaming about the ice cream and desserts she will indulge in once they reach Border Town. We then cut back to Neverwinter City, where Nightingale receives a report from the First Army about their mission to infiltrate the church and seize the Divine Judgment Stones. The report states that Silver City has lowered its drawbridge, and the armies are currently entering the church. Noticing how Sigil's transmission is heavily distorted, Roland deduces that this must be the maximum distance the communication sigil can operate without losing connection. If he wants direct communication with the north and east, he'll need to set up relay stations. But Nightingale reminds him that there aren't enough sigils for that. Only 4 pairs were ever made, and 2 of them are already in use for the current mission in Silver City. Besides, producing more isn't an option since capturing devils isn't exactly easy. As Roland tries to figure out a solution to their communication problem, Nightingale receives another transmission. The report confirms that there are no Divine Judgment Stones in the church. The place is completely empty. Even the basement has nothing. This leads Nightingale to suspect that the church might have fled, causing the prince immense disappointment. Suddenly, the sigil picks up another transmission, and it's lightning this time. She reports that the red mist beyond the snowy mountains has disappeared, or rather it's currently dissipating. Roland finds it hard to believe, but lightning confirms it again. They're witnessing it with their own eyes, and Maggie is also a witness. Roland quickly warns them not to get any closer to the Devil's camp and to return immediately. Then, he instructs Nightingale to summon Agatha, as she might have an answer for this unusual behavior of devils. Unfortunately, Agatha has no explanation. The Alliance rarely had the chance to make contact with the Devil's inner camps, so she's never heard of anything like this happening before. In decades of war, she has never seen the Devils retreat. With no immediate answers, Roland decides to keep an eye on the Devil's movements. 5 days pass, Roland receives a report from Lightning that the mist has completely disappeared. In this case, Nightingale suggests launching an investigation, and Roland agrees. Soon they gather the witches best suited for the mission. Before long, they arrive at the Devil's hideout. Agatha notes that this is the closest she has ever been to a Devil camp in her lifetime. Lightning quickly reports their arrival at the location. The prince reminds them to stay cautious and retreat at the first sign of danger. As they walk through the Devil's Nest, they realize just how eerie the place looks, something they hadn't noticed when they flew over it in a balloon. Agatha can't determine the reason for the Devil's retreat, but it hasn't been long since they left. The towers haven't completely wilted yet. They've only darkened in color, and it'll take some time before they become brittle. This camp is nothing like the frontline camp the Alliance captured in her day. This suggests that the Devils weren't preparing for a retreat. Instead, their decision was sudden and unexpected. Agatha decides to venture deeper into the center, to the area where the multi-eyed devil was last seen. That's the only place where they might find any clues. As Lightning takes an extra step, the brittle ground beneath her crumbles, and she falls into a hole. But she quickly flies out of the pit. When they peek inside, they spot a devil lying at the bottom, and it looks long dead. Agatha starts piecing things together to figure out the situation. According to Sylvie, devils usually reside underground, which solidifies the evidence that everything happened very suddenly here. These devils couldn't have been waiting for new orders until death. Lightning suggests flying instead of walking to avoid falling into any more pits. As they take to the air, they discover a massive hole. While Lightning is looking forward to going deeper inside, Maggie and Agatha strongly protest against the idea of going inside, for obvious reasons. While exploring the area from above, they come across a towering wall of mountain stones blocking their path. Lotus steps up, using her powers to widen the path by moving the stones away. As they go further, they stumble upon a treasure trove of magic stones and other valuable items. Maggie takes on the task of transporting the goods back. Back in Neverwinter City, we return to Roland. He reflects on their mission. While Maggie has already taken a whole bunch of magic stones back home, Summer is currently working on deciphering what happened. Nightingale arrives with a letter in hand, addressed to Roland. Before we find out who sent the message, the scene transitions to the docks. There, laborers are working hard to rebuild the collapsed dock. According to Nana's report, 3 construction workers broke their legs in the accident. The prince takes full responsibility, admitting that the dock's design was flawed and promises that it won't happen again. However, that's not the main reason Roland is here. It's actually because Tilly has just arrived. The siblings shake hands and greet each other. Tilly reveals that she managed to bring Heidi with her, the leader of the Bloodfang. Roland is surprised and wonders if this means Tilly has resolved the internal conflict plaguing Sleeping Island. Tilly clarifies that while she has Heidi restrained, she hasn't yet revealed what happened to the witches who were rejected by Bloodfang, though she promised to explain everything once she meets with Roland. Tilly believes that Heidi sees Roland as her last hope. Since he is the ruler of Grey Castle and represents the elite, Heidi is banking on striking a deal with him to save her own life. She's hoping Roland will help her regain her position in Wolfheart. Later, we see Andrea reading that letter from her friends, Otto and Oro, who are in the Kingdom of Dawn. Andrea is a bit frustrated that Otto put both his life and Oro's on the line, but Ash is actually feeling grateful for both of them. It's all thanks to them that they now have intel on the church's movements ahead of time. Tilly asks if Roland has replied to Otto yet. Roland responds positively. He advised Otto not to be reckless. If the divine judgment stones are truly useless against pure witches, then mortals won't be able to restrain them. With the vast distance between Grey Castle and the Kingdom of Dawn, providing immediate aid would be impossible. The only smart move is for Prince Appin to keep his head down and act only after the church fully turns its attention toward Grey Castle. Andrea, knowing Otto's personality all too well, doubts he'll just sit idly by. But Roland assures her that Otto will listen. After all, Otto is a sucker for Andrea. And since Roland promised she would be safe in Neverwinter City even if they fought the church head-on, no one would be able to hurt her. Seeing Andrea die is the last thing Otto would ever want. Of course, Andrea gets annoyed, while Ash doesn't waste the opportunity to tease her about her supposed admirers doing everything they can to protect her. Tilly cuts through the banter, bringing them back to the main topic, how they plan to defend against the church. Roland initiates the discussion by revealing that after receiving the reports, he sent the First Army to stockpile supplies in Valleytown and clear out any church influence there. Hearing this, Tilly raises her concerns. With Roland's approach, the holy city of Hermes will easily detect Grey Castle's movements. And if that happens, her own plan to advance to Blizzard Town will also be exposed. Andrea shares the same thoughts. After all, they were supposed to mislead the church with false information. But unlike Nikocado Avocado, Roland is actually 2 steps ahead. With his approach, he won't have to guess where the church will attack from. If he knows the church's invasion route in advance, he can minimize civilian casualties. Not to mention, direct defense is what the First Army excels at. His only real problem now is figuring out how to deal with the pure witches. That's when Tilly places a reassuring hand on Roland's shoulder. This is exactly why she's here. She promises her brother that the witches of Sleeping Island will aid him in this battle. Later, Tilly enters her designated resting quarters. She notes how clean and elegant the place is, with no shortage of fresh snacks. As she looks around in awe, Ash casually asks why she called Roland brother today. After all, she used to insist that he wasn't the same person he once was. Tilly simply brushes it off, admitting that she still believes he isn't her stupid brother anymore. But at the end of the day, he's still her brother, just a smarter one. Besides, that's not what's important right now. Tilly wants to know if Ash has ever considered the significance of the war with the church. Of course, the not-so-intelligent Ash thinks it might just be revenge witches we'll finally be able to get. But Tilly corrects her, reminding her that what they're truly fighting for is a free life, not revenge. She then further asks Ash if she's ever thought about moving to Neverwinter City, living here with everyone instead of staying on Sleeping Island. Ash agrees that Neverwinter is great, and there's obviously a reason why the former Witch Association chose to serve under Roland. But she believes the witches from Sleeping Island are different. They already have a place to call home. Tilly then educates Ash on the 3 outcomes of the war she predicts. The first is that they won't be able to stop the Divine Punishment Army and may fall in the north. In that case, whether it's Sleeping Island or Neverwinter City, it won't matter. But Ash quickly shuts Tilly down, refusing to even consider dying. She promises that as long as she's here, she won't let Tilly die. Tilly tries to calm the overly dramatic Ash by reminding her that it was just a hypothetical scenario. She's confident she won't die in battle either. Anyway, Tilly proceeds to explain her second predicted outcome. If Roland fails but the witches of Sleeping Island survive, then if Grey Castle falls and Neverwinter is lost, the only safe place left for them will be Sleeping Island. She hopes they can keep resisting the church's advances from there until the Divine War arrives. In the third outcome, if the church falls and Roland takes over the holy city of Hermes, all witches will finally be able to escape oppression and prejudice, leading to true salvation. And when that day comes, the main reason for Sleeping Island's existence will disappear. You see, Sleeping Island was originally meant to be a sanctuary for witches. But if the church falls, there'll be no reason to hide on a cramped island in the middle of the ocean. Once the church is gone, witches will be able to live anywhere they want. No matter where they go, Ash is willing to stay by Tilly's side, ready to protect her. Later, we find Roland sipping tea, thinking about Tilly and why her mood toward him has drastically shifted. He asks Nightingale about it, but even she seems clueless. However, Nightingale has a hunch that Roland's quick decision to fight all out against the church might have something to do with it. It's just a guess, but Roland seems to believe this might be the true reason behind Tilly's change in attitude. But either way, he's happy that Sleeping Island has placed more faith in him. Later, Roland goes to meet Heidi, who's trapped in a cage. She had been knocked out before Nana treated her injuries to protect Nana from her. The other witches of Bloodfang reveal that Heidi tried to take Andrea hostage when she was surrounded, so Nightingale warns Roland to be cautious around her. He then orders Nightingale to wake her up. Nightingale promptly goes to the other side of the cage and wakes Heidi. Once she's awake, Roland introduces himself as Roland Wimbledon, King of Grey Castle. Since she wanted to speak to him, he's here. The first question he asks her is what happened to the witches who were rejected by Bloodfang. I already have a hunch that she might have handed them over to the church, and Roland seems to think the same. As far as he's concerned, Duke Island was under Duke Morgan's jurisdiction, and since Heidi was his heir, she should have cared for the handful of support witches she deemed as worthless. Even if their abilities were of no use, it would have been nothing more than providing them with food to keep them alive. Moreover, support witches are far more useful than she seems to understand. Of course, Heidi scoffs at the idea, which makes Roland chuckle. He wonders if she thinks he took the capital and became king solely by using combat witches. If combat witches were so powerful, they wouldn't have been oppressed and forced to live in hiding. So, he asks her again, where did those witches go? Heidi lies, claiming she released them and told them to find other witch organizations. She vaguely suggests that some went to neighboring towns or possibly to Dawn, but her lies don't go unnoticed by Nightingale. Roland feels disappointed in her, while Heidi continues to insist she's not lying. Roland responds by letting her know that Nightingale can detect the truth, so no lies can escape her abilities. Though Heidi isn't in a position to negotiate, she tries to strike a deal with Roland. She explains that the Wolfheart Kingdom has already been swallowed by the church, the king is missing, and she's the last of the Morgan bloodline. She promises that if Roland helps her take back Wolfheart, she will repay him in ways he can't even imagine. Money, jewels, witches, anything he wants. But Roland responds sharply, making it clear that he's only interested in knowing what happened to those witches. His complete disregard for her offer catches Heidi off guard. To think that a few witches are worth more to him than an entire kingdom is beyond her comprehension. Roland, on the other hand, has no interest in some distant land. All he wants is the truth. This back and forth is nothing more than an act of courtesy. He has plenty of other ways to make her talk. She must understand that avoiding the truth will only bring her pain. He emphasizes that he is a man of his word, so she'd better not take his warning lightly. Finally, Heidi speaks the truth, admitting that she handed the rejected witches over to aristocrats. While she didn't directly sell them, it was still a trade of sorts. Since not enough witches awakened on Duke Island to bolster their numbers, she needed to spread the word about Bloodfang across Wolfheart to attract more witches. Roland then questions her about the person who recruited the witches for her. Heidi mentions Skyflame, though she has already been killed by Ash during the arrest. She insists that all she wanted was to help her father reclaim the throne that was meant to be his. With the interrogation complete, Roland prepares to leave. Seeing this, Nightingale raises her voice, questioning whether he really intends to spare a murderer like Heidi. But Roland sets the record straight. Heidi Morgan is a resident of Sleeping Island. It is not his place to decide her fate. That decision belongs to Tilly. Later, Roland fills Tilly in on how Heidi sent the witches to filthy aristocrats as payment. Tilly asks if Nightingale verified this. Roland replies that it didn't take much for Heidi to cave since she seems mentally weak. Though saddened by the twisted truth, Tilly expresses her gratitude to Roland for separating the water from the milk. Roland is more than happy to help his sister. Furthermore, he reminds her that since Heidi is a Sleeping Island witch, it's up to Tilly to decide her fate. While Tilly understands what he is saying, she still wants to hear his opinion. What would he have done in her place? Roland simply replies that he would do exactly what Tilly would do. This makes Tilly crack a smile as she has figured out what must be done with Heidi. As she prepares to leave, their attention is caught by Lightning, who is reporting something urgent through the sigil. When Roland responds, she describes the sighting of strange monsters. She struggles to put it into words. This is an unprecedented discovery, as these creatures have never been seen before. She wants Roland to witness them with his own eyes. Later, Roland boards his steamship and reaches the location to investigate personally. As they walk through the land once occupied by the devils, they come across a mark, one seemingly left behind by Lotus. There are also holes in the cliff. While Nightingale isn't sure of their purpose, she claims to have seen similar holes in the barren mountains, though those were slightly bigger in comparison. The further she went, the more she felt something was watching her. And not just one thing. It was near the valley where the association had set up camp. A narrow path leads even deeper underground, but she didn't dare to venture too far. Roland, fascinated by this discovery, decides to investigate that place as well once they finish here. They finally meet Agatha and Soraya, but Lightning and the others are missing. Roland asks Agatha about it. Agatha explains that Lightning is flying all over the place with Summer. This uncharted land is like a giant playground for her to explore. Roland isn't surprised. If these ancient monuments and devil towers existed in his old world, they'd probably be turned into a national park with ridiculously expensive tickets. Nightingale overhears and questions what the hell he's even talking about. Roland quickly changes the subject, telling her to call Lightning back using the listening sigil. Soon enough, Summer, Maggie, and Lightning return. Now that everyone is here, Roland decides to begin the task at hand. Summer promptly uses her ability to recreate a holographic projection of what happened here. A giant stone tower suddenly materializes through her magic. The scene they're about to witness takes place right before the devils disappeared. Since Summer can maintain the memory for around half an hour, they will be able to see the entire process. But Roland is particularly interested in the devil with multiple eyes, the one that detected Sylvie's magic. Agatha reveals that it was at the top of the tower. However, it's too far from Summer's holographic range, so they can't see it for now. As the projection progresses, they witness a giant worm devouring the black stone tower. And after swallowing the tower, the worm simply disappears. Tilly is absolutely shocked to realize that this is the same worm that devoured Agatha's lab. What bothers her is why it would be hostile toward the devil camp. The only explanation Roland can think of is that this worm monster isn't being controlled by the devils, or at least, not by these particular devils. Agatha shares the same thoughts. There were no records of a creature like this in the past divine wars. If the devils truly had control over something this massive, none of them would have survived. But the question remains, if the devils aren't controlling it, then who is? Not to mention, there were also the invisible praying mantises that only Nightingale could see. Tilly would bet her life that these aren't just stray monsters wandering aimlessly. They have a clear purpose. Nightingale, however, believes that these creatures aren't being controlled by anyone at all. They have their own will. After all, hybrid monsters aren't typical demons. Judging from what they observed during the months of demons, the highly evolved demons possessed intelligence. It's possible that these creatures have grown smarter over time, adapting as they survived long enough. Roland is forced to acknowledge this possibility as well. After all, when the conditions and environment for intelligent life are optimal, their traits can change drastically. It's still unclear whether or not humans are truly the smartest organisms in this world. Suddenly, Lightning spots a tunnel. They light a torch and begin exploring this unknown place. Seeing how much remains unexplored, Roland decides to thoroughly investigate the first tall mountain in the western region. Later, as everyone waits, Lightning returns with a map in her hands after flying around and surveying the entire mountain. Roland thanks her for her efforts and asks if she discovered anything new. The only thing Lightning found was snow. No large animals, no demons, and no traces of devils. Roland takes the drawn map and examines it carefully. The layout of the mountains resembles a massive volcano, and there is moving water beneath the thick ice. Naturally, Nightingale is curious about what might be at the mountain's peak. Well, only the gods would know. Perhaps ruins, or even more blackstone towers. Roland also takes note of the source of the Redwater River. Lightning explains that it's hidden within the clouds, and if not for the sound of rushing water, she wouldn't have noticed it. He asks if she attempted to enter the cracks where the water was leaking from. Lightning admits that she did try, but she couldn't get through. The cracks were large enough to pass through, half the height of a castle, but the mist created by the rapids was too dense, making it impossible to see. Strong winds pushed her back before she could go any deeper. Roland sternly tells her not to do anything so reckless again. If she ever wants to attempt something that dangerous, she must get permission first. Now that most of the area has been explored, Roland decides to return. But Lightning isn't satisfied as she still wants to explore the highest mountain. Roland, however, postpones further exploration until Sylvie returns. For now, his priority is preparing to confront the church. This is when Nightingale is struck by a sudden realization. She recalls how cold it gets at the mountain's peak. Too cold for anyone to set up camp there. This means the giant worm monster could be hiding inside the mountain. Since these creatures are adept at burrowing tunnels, it wouldn't be hard for them to create a nest within the mountains. And speaking of burrowing tunnels, she wonders if the holes in the barren mountains are also connected to these worm monsters. Meanwhile, back in Grey Castle, the stargazer Missan is ready to observe the night sky through a telescope Roland recently provided. One of his assistants reports that all the equipment has been set up. Missan then asks if there have been any disturbances in the star regions. The assistant responds with a yes. However, Master Skygleam from Area North 1 is resting after falling sick, so Master Void is taking his place. In that case, Missan decides to begin their stargazing session. As they peer through the telescope, they notice a faint red light in the sky, which of course shocks the hell out of the old man. The only thing running through his mind is that perhaps the prophecy has finally materialized into reality. He orders his assistant to scribble down what he is about to describe. Area East Summer 3, between the Six-Path Star and Sky-Scorched Star. The assistant questions what name to give it, but the old man suggests leaving it blank for now. Furthermore, he orders his assistant to gather all the master scholars on the observation deck and dismiss all the apprentices. Later, as all the big shots gather, the old man reports that signs of disaster have appeared. This causes a wave of panic among everyone present. They debate what to do next. One suggests reporting it to the king, but another raises concerns that Roland might not believe them. However, one scholar reminds them that even if Roland does not believe them, what they witnessed will not just disappear. At this point, Misan cuts them off and suggests keeping the news of the Red Star secret for now, as he intends to observe it for a few more days. 1 week later, they learn that the Red Star has not moved a single inch in all this time. The one reporting this is Master Rose Star. He further reveals that its light has been changing. If the descent of the star means everyone in the kingdom will see it, then it is very likely that the Doomsday Star will soon outshine the embarking star. For the public, a burning red star would be an ominous sight, and though they may not be educated in recognizing celestial bodies, they can still see them. Some stars are as bright as the moon and can always be recognized with the naked eye on a clear night. If this star has a unique color, it will definitely be discovered right away. Misan acknowledges the panic and uproar this could cause if the star becomes even more visible than it already is. So, he decides to write to Roland immediately, hoping they are not too late. We then cut to Roland and Anna spending time together. Anna is visibly sad because her name is not on the dispatch list for the upcoming war against the church. While Roland understands her concerns, he simply cannot put her in danger. Bordertown's military-industrial production needs her, and without her, they would not be able to manufacture anything, from machine gun parts to howitzer fuses. These are crucial if they want to win the war. Initially, Anna thought he did not want her to go because the front lines were too dangerous. Roland assures her that while fighting the church definitely carries an element of danger, he is confident they will win. So, she has nothing to worry about, and staying in Neverwinter is the best way she can contribute to the war effort. But Anna still wishes to stay by Roland's side during this time. After all, this time is different from anything they have been through before. Fighting the church will be the biggest challenge they have ever faced, and it will either result in the destruction of Hermes or the defeat of the First Army. She fears that if he loses, she might lose him forever, and it will be months before she hears any news in Neverwinter. She does not want to endure those grueling months, anxiously awaiting word of his well-being. Roland finally agrees to let her tag along, but he sets one condition. If things go wrong on the battlefield, she must leave the northern region immediately, no matter what. She promises that if the situation turns dire, she will return to the western region immediately and take refuge on Slumber Island along with the other witches, continuing the fight from there. But for now, she wants to follow him everywhere he goes, though she knows this is not exactly what he wants from her. So she promises him that until the world becomes what he envisions, she will keep going in his place, all the way until mortals and witches can live side by side. Their sentimental and caring conversation gets them in the mood, and soon enough, they begin their fun session. We then cut to the border town. There, Roland greets the citizens. He starts his speech by acknowledging that everyone is aware of the kingdom's upcoming defense against invaders. Their enemy is the holy city of Hermes, which has already consumed Everwinter and Wolfheart, and now they are targeting the western region. While he knows that some people here have believed in God and trusted the church before, and he completely respects that, but he reminds them that the church took advantage of their goodwill, and now they must pay the price. By selling the Stone of Divine Judgment alone to the masses, they earn hundreds of thousands of golden royals annually, money that rightfully belongs to the common people. The reason is simple. The elites were not willing to spend much on these stones, so the church piled the cost onto everyday citizens, raising taxes, fees, and even confiscating property. The church promised that all the money the public gave them would buy God's protection, but it was all a lie, and the truth is evident. There were always people starving and freezing during the months of demons, which clearly shows that no one received the protection the church had promised. Reality has proven that without the church, Neverwinter City has become even greater, and the same goes for all other cities. So, Roland declares that he will never surrender or lose to these parasites. He announces that the First Army will crush them, and no one will ever steal from his citizens again. After hearing this powerful speech, the public erupts into cheers, openly denouncing the church and showing their full support for Roland. While Roland understands their enthusiasm, he reminds them that it is the First Army's responsibility to fight on the battlefield, and no one will be required to pay a war tax. That is something the enemy will have to do. So, he requests that they continue devoting themselves to the production and expansion of Neverwinter City as always. That is the best way they can help their soldiers on the front lines, Once again, the common people erupt into a round of applause for Roland's visionary thinking, confident that victory is within their grasp. The scene then cuts to Valleytown, where Iris's father Carlin has come to meet his daughter. However, his excitement fades quickly when she questions why he is even here. She had written him a letter a month ago, asking him to cooperate with the First Army's preparations. Carlin reveals that he had immediately contacted Valleytown's Duke Hall and assigned the butler to oversee everything, so he questions whether this level of cooperation is not enough. Iris only grows more disappointed upon hearing this. This battle against the church is incredibly important, and she wanted him to manage everything personally. The father and daughter go back and forth, with Iris repeatedly reminding her father of the responsibilities he should be handling. Eventually, after being firm with him, she gives him a well-deserved hug and welcomes him to Valleytown. As they sit down, Iris reminds him that they are waiting for Roland to arrive in Valleytown. But there is much more to do than just that. They need to transport everything required for battle, food, horses, fabric, medicine. She also received another secret letter from His Majesty. They will need to move as much metal and bronze here as they can spare. While Carlin is unsure if Roland can completely uproot the church and seize Hermes, Iris has complete faith in him. She believes that stopping the church from invading the kingdom at Blizzard Town will not be too difficult. Time is the resource His Majesty lacks the most. Since her father has not seen Roland's factories, he does not understand the true might of Neverwinter City. The firearms Roland has invented are incredibly powerful, and the factories just keep churning them out. Any citizen can kill an enemy with only half an hour of training. To sum it up, she is 100% certain that Roland can defeat the church. Since Iris holds Roland in such high regard, Carlin questions her in disappointment. If she thinks so highly of him, then why did Roland never respond to his letter? When she asks which letter he is referring to, he reveals that it was a marriage proposal for her. Given how much she praises Roland, he questions why she has not considered marrying him. Not to mention, she even rejected Timothy in favor of someone better. Iris finally decides to explain her point of view. Timothy needed an ally, or rather a lackey he could rely on, and marriage was just a pretense to make that happen. If she had refused, he would have discarded the Candle family and chosen someone else willing to obey him. But in Roland's case, he does not even need the Candle family. He chose her to work for him because of her abilities, not because of her background. Carlin, however, still believes his point stands. In fact, he argues that it is even better that Roland holds her in high regard. She could become the queen and give birth to a prince. He then reveals that the Candle family will become an indisputable ally to the royal family, and her brother's well-being will also be secured. But then again, she refuses his idea because Majesty Roland believes in love, and he is already interested in a witch. For a moment, Carlin thinks that Roland might be in a political marriage with a witch for an ulterior motive. But Iris corrects her father, revealing that he just so happened to fall in love with a woman who is a witch. And he strongly believes in love and envisions that love will be the protagonist in marriage. His father quickly reminds her that witches can't bear any children, so there won't be any heirs. But Iris reminds her father that this is a problem for Roland to worry about, and they do not have any right to enforce their beliefs either. We then cut to the First Army, which has currently unfolded into Blizzard Town. Captain Brian questions Iron Axe if they are not going to evacuate the Blizzard Town civilians beforehand because the Holy City may forcibly transform them into berserkers. Iron Axe does not want to risk alerting the enemy, or at least they can't take this risk before they finish setting up their base. He further assures Brian that they will be ready in 3 days, so afterward, their only responsibility will be to evacuate the villagers. This is when we see Maggie, who reports to Iron Axe that there are large troops moving towards Blizzard Town, and they number about 1,000 people. They don't have any supply carriages, and she did not see any civilian soldiers either. Some of them were carrying huge shields and spears. Iron Axe asks her about the scale of those big shields she speaks of, to which she reveals that they are just as tall as Iron Axe. Brian is seemingly worried to hear the report. The enemy is marching at an unusually high pace, and it's going to take at least 2 to 3 days for Roland to arrive at Valleytown. And the fortress cannons are not ready either. It looks like the church's response is faster than they had thought. But regardless of whether Roland is here or not, Iron Axe believes that they must carry out their duties instead of retreating a single step. He is not willing to let the enemy step 1 foot past their line of defense. Later, the church's soldiers finally come across the First Army. The church soldiers quickly draw their shields and hide behind them. The First Army, from the other side, also begins the barrage of bullets. While some church soldiers manage to withstand the barrage of bullets, some of them are dead on the spot. As the church soldiers march forward, the First Army has no option but to engage in hand-to-hand combat. While Iron Axe is distracted with one soldier, another enemy soldier tries to pierce him down. But Iron Axe quickly pulls out his revolver and takes the bastard down. All the while, Roland has also arrived at Willowtown on one of his best ships. Iris is also there to greet Roland and offers congratulations for the victory the First Army just snagged. Roland is glad to hear this, though he was already briefed while he was still on the ship. He also heard from Iron Axe that the Candle family ensured that all food and supplies were delivered, which helped successfully trick the enemy. Iris is glad to hear this acknowledgement, and also believes that it was the duty of the Candle family to perform. The northern region merchants were also glad to assist him. She then decides to take him into his newly acquired office in Valley Town. Actually, she talked to Duke Hall, and he promised to lend his castle for Roland to occupy during his stay here. She has further remodeled the guest office according to Bordertown's design. Floor-to-ceiling windows have been installed on the room's east side. Roland is quite astonished to hear this, though he is a little worried about the Duke and where he is going to stay until then. Iris reveals that he is staying at a countryside manor to avoid disturbing Roland. She then questions him if he wishes to meet him. Well, Roland believes that meeting him is not necessary, so there is no point in bothering him if he simply is not interested in these matters. In this case, Iris decides to escort him to the castle. For a moment, Roland feels absolutely smitten, given how much protocol he is getting. He is really enjoying the taste of absolute power. As Roland sits in his newly furnished office in Valley Town, he reads the recent exploits of the First Army. This recent battle was actually a notable event, as the First Army managed to take down 156 Divine Punishment soldiers in action. While the numbers seem small, it's going to serve as a huge slap to the church. He is also glad that the First Army did not encounter any difficult pure witches. If this had happened, Sylvie and Evie would not have been enough. This is when Iron Axe joins the scene and reports that there were 2 casualties and 21 severe injuries. All losses resulted from spears thrown at close quarters, but thankfully, the wounded have fully recovered and resumed their duties. Roland then instructs Iron Axe to arrange for a ship to transport the deceased back to Neverwinter. It looks like Iron Axe has some extra tidbits to share. After interrogating the church's military officer, he found very special intel, and it's related to Divine Punishment soldiers. Later, Roland meets the captured soldiers to interrogate them personally. He asks if any of them have participated in the Divine Punishment ritual before. He wants to know the entire procedure required to become a Divine Punishment soldier. However, not a single person speaks. Seeing this, Iron Axe grabs one of the soldiers by the collar, making it clear that cooperation is not optional. The soldier, rattled by the threat, quickly insists that he has already told them everything he knew, but Roland warns him that lies won't take him anywhere. Eventually, the soldier reveals that the ritual takes place in the Sky Tower, and that only Divine Punishment soldiers, their controllers, and the Pope are allowed inside. Everyone must remain completely silent to ensure nothing goes wrong. When Roland asks why silence is required, the soldier hesitates before revealing that the newly transformed warriors determine their commander through sound. Roland then inquires this bastard if he ever get the chance to command any punishment soldiers. The captive concedes that he once managed a small team of 10 Divine Punishment warriors. While those 10 soldiers obeyed his commands, all Divine Punishment soldiers ultimately followed the Pope's orders. Piecing things together, Roland deduces that the Pope must be using sound to control the soldiers. Initially, he had considered the possibility of brainwaves or a soul connection, but this information suggests otherwise. He notes that sound-based control is an incredible vulnerability. If communication between squads and Central Command is disrupted, it would cripple their coordination. Finally, he has identified a weakness to exploit. Since every Divine Punishment soldier has a designated controller, Agatha wonders what happens if their controller dies. The captive hesitates before claiming that he does not know. Roland can tell that he is lying. If this shithead does not want to suffer for half a month in the dungeon, he better stop playing games. Faced with no other option, the soldier confesses that Divine Punishment soldiers who lose their controllers instinctively head toward the Badlands. That is all he knows. Agatha presses further, but it appears the soldier has no more information. He claims he only heard rumors that long ago, some Divine Punishment warriors who never received orders set off toward the Badlands and never returned. Agatha then asks if he knows the process required to create these soldiers. In response, the captive reveals that only the Pope possesses that knowledge. Given this, Agatha asks how the church was originally founded 400 years ago, and if the soldier has heard of names like Alice, the Alliance, or Tequila City. The soldier's response remains negative. Even Roland can tell that this time, the captive genuinely does not know. Having extracted all useful information, Roland decides to leave. Before he does, Iron Axe asks what they should do with the prisoners. Roland simply reminds him to fulfill the promise he made earlier. Later, as Roland sits in his office, he questions Agatha about whether she knows anything regarding the production of Divine Punishment soldiers. As far as Agatha is concerned, research on Divine Punishment soldiers should have ceased after Tequila was completely destroyed, so she lacks concrete knowledge. However, she is certain the process cannot be as simple as the prisoner described. After all, his explanation does not clarify how a new pope inherits control over the existing soldiers. Furthermore, it is strange that divine punishment soldiers instinctively move toward the Badlands after losing their controllers. That region once contained fertile lands 400 years ago, but now there is nothing there besides the ruins of Tequila. Roland decides not to dwell on this mystery for now. The more pressing concern is how to deal with the divine punishment soldiers. If they are truly controlled by sound, perhaps Sister Echo could interfere with their commands. However, Agatha believes this is impossible. Echo would need to mimic the exact sound of a controller, which would require Nightingale's mist ability to get close enough to the controller and observe. During that time, Roland would be defenseless, and a single pure witch with special abilities could easily assassinate him. That is a risk they cannot afford to take. Although Roland is a mere mortal, weak and powerless, he is temporarily indispensable in the battle against the devils. Protecting him is the highest priority. Hearing this, Roland is unsure whether to take it as a compliment or an insult. He assures Agatha that he will keep a stone of divine judgment with him at all times. However, Agatha reminds him that the stones are only one line of defense and cannot guarantee his safety. Even Nightingale cannot ensure his survival, but having some protection is better than none. Nightingale takes this comment personally, responding sharply that as long as she is alive, she will not allow any harm to come to Roland. Speaking of protection, Agatha recalls why Lady Alice was able to become the Queen of Stars and the Chief of the Council. Beyond her incredible strength, her intelligence and strategies surpassed most witches. Many of her decisions saved the Alliance from destruction, and without her, Tequila certainly would not have lasted as long as it did. So she can't stand the fact that divine soldiers, which Alice created to protect witches, are now being used against witches. From her words, Roland deduces that the current divine punishment soldiers are not the same as those from 400 years ago. Agatha admits this is just speculation, she cannot confirm it. After all, only the Church knows what truly happened to the Alliance after Tequila fell. Later, Roland reflects on the current state of the divine punishment soldiers. Once the Queen of Stars, Alice, paid a hefty price to create them, but now they are nothing more than mindless killing machines for the Church. Suddenly, the listening sigil picks up Lightning's transmission. She reports that she is above Blizzard Town, facing northwest, and the enemy is currently retreating. They are all fleeing back to the Holy City. The report brings a smile to Nightingale's face. It seems the enemy is starting to feel fear. Roland thinks the same. This also means that the Holy City is temporarily unable to send reinforcements. He had predicted this would happen, as the army of 1,000 soldiers they faced was likely just a hastily assembled vanguard. Seizing this opportunity, Roland decides to evacuate the townspeople. Additionally, he sees this as the perfect time to negotiate with the local aristocrats. He assigns Iron Axe and Iris to handle the task. We then cut to the Holy City, where we see these devastated archbishops, who are in shambles after receiving loss in the battle against Roland. To them, defeating Blizzard Town should not have been a problem. After all, the Church had sent an army of 1,000 soldiers, accompanied separately by 300 divine punishment warriors. Not to mention, the commander leading the army was a veteran, with hundreds of battles behind him before he became an archbishop. There was no way they should have suffered such a catastrophic loss, even if they had faced devils or beasts from the Badlands. Just then, a priest rushes in, bringing urgent news. Archbishop Sully has regained consciousness. The two priests stationed outside immediately rush inside to interrogate him. The first thing they demand to know is what happened in Blizzard Town, and how he could have possibly failed so miserably. Still traumatized to his core, Sully quickly blurts out that Blizzard Town was a death trap from the start. The firearms Roland Wimbledon used were far deadlier than Timothy's. He insists that Pope Maine must be warned as soon as possible. However, one of the archbishops grows furious and grabs Sully by the collar. He is convinced that Sully is merely making excuses to avoid taking responsibility for the disaster. The priest demands that Sully answer for the terrible loss and the dire state of their remaining forces. Word of their failure has already begun spreading in the Holy City. If the Church had not silenced those spreading the rumors, this would have been the talk of the town by tomorrow. At that moment, Zero enters the room. She informs Sully that the Pope has summoned him and asks if he is able to walk. With the help of a few guards, Sully manages to stand and follows her. The two archbishops attempt to join the discussion with the Pope, but Zero denies their request, telling them to remain where they are. She reminds them that His Holiness does not wish to reveal the secrets of the divine punishment warriors. The mention of a secret only makes the archbishops more curious, but Zero reiterates that it is knowledge they are not meant to have. As they walk, Zero asks Sully how he intends to explain his failure to the Pope. Sully does not attempt to make excuses and acknowledges his defeat. He admits that he underestimated the enemy and is willing to accept any punishment the Pope deems necessary. Furthermore, he expresses his wish to become a divine punishment warrior. Zero suddenly stops, turning toward him. She asks if he truly wishes to abandon his position as an archbishop and become nothing more than a puppet. But Soli insists that the divine punishment warriors are not puppets. In his eyes, they are brave fighters, and he has dedicated his life to fighting gloriously for the church. Zero, however, remains doubtful that the Pope will grant his request. Soli is positive that if he insists enough, he can convince Pope Main to allow it. He has complete faith in the Pope, but Zero reminds him that it is not a matter of persuasion. You see, the transformation requires the witch's blood, and even then, it is not a simple process. Since Soli has already lost an arm, even if the ritual succeeds, his combat ability will be greatly diminished. So why would the Pope waste precious witch's blood on a cripple? Soli picks up on her suspicious tone. He recalls that the divine punishment ritual is a closely guarded secret known only to the Pope. So how does Zero know that it requires witch's blood? Soli is certain that Pope Main would never have told her such information. Zero smirks, confirming his suspicions. Indeed, Main never told her. But she does not need him to because she is the Pope. Before Soli can react, she eliminates him instantly, absorbing all his memories and experiences for herself. Later, Zero walks into the secret temple and begins to relive Soli's memories of the war. Through his memories, she witnesses the devastating defeat firsthand. The divine punishment soldiers were utterly overwhelmed by the First Army, unable to even get close before being taken down. Seeing this unfold, she finally understands why Soli lost the battle so decisively. This revelation piques her interest in Roland Wimbledon more than ever before. The scene transitions to Border Town, where Tilly seeks a conversation with Evie regarding Bloodfang, Heidi Morgan, and Annie. When Evie inquires about Heidi's whereabouts, Tilly explains that she has been punished. Skyflame resisted arrest back on Slumber Island and met the same fate. Tilly wants Evie's help to restore order to Slumber Island. While it is unacceptable for battle witches to oppress support witches, the reverse would be just as destructive. She believes that the remaining members of Bloodfang, like Evie, were merely deceived by Heidi and do not deserve discrimination. Evie is ready to assist but is unsure of what she should do. Ash advises her to share her story about Annie with the other Bloodfang members, while she herself will reveal the extent of Heidi's crimes. After the church is completely eradicated, Tilly plans to launch an investigation into the nobles of Wolfheart who imprisoned witches. If any of those witches are still alive, she is confident that Roland will be able to rescue them. As they discuss the witches Heidi sold to nobles, Evie recalls her friend Annie and begins to cry. Annie had been her warmth and comfort during her darkest times. The story then shifts to Roland in Blizzard Town, who appears extremely stressed. Sensing this, Nightingale arrives and offers him a much-needed head massage. An officer interrupts, reporting that a woman is waiting outside the castle, insisting on meeting him. The guards attempted to stop her, but she kneeled on the ground, pleading to see him no matter the cost. She has been lingering around the castle since yesterday. The officer further hesitantly reveals that the woman claims to be Wimbledon's wife. Nightingale goes absolutely bananas hearing this. She assumes that it must be Roland's illegitimate affair. Roland, on the other hand, struggles to process the absurdity of it. Since when did the fourth prince acquire a lover from the north when he had never even visited it? Determined to get to the bottom of this, Roland orders the officer to bring her in. The supposed wife enters his office and greets him, introducing herself as Livy from Blizzard Town. Roland demands to know why she is making such a claim, and what exactly she means by it. Livy apologizes for spreading a false rumor but explains that she had no choice. She was certain he wouldn't see her otherwise. She clarifies that while she may not count as a legitimate wife, she had a relationship with his brother. This revelation shocks both Roland and Nightingale, who immediately assume she is referring to Timothy. However, Livy quickly denies this and instead claims that she was involved with Gerald. While she was aware of Gerald's ambitions to seize the throne, she hopes that Roland will be willing to help her for the sake of his deceased brother. She elaborates that she met Gerald while working as an escort in a pub. Due to the stark difference in their social statuses, they could never marry legally. Instead, they spent time together in a small countryside cabin. After Gerald's death, she was forced to return to the pub, where the owner was displeased with her sudden absence. He continually harassed her, recently even attempting to drag her into his room. She wants to escape but doesn't know how. The only person she could think of who might help her is Roland. Roland suggests that she return with them to the western region, promising to arrange food, shelter, and a job for her. However, Livy expresses her desire to stay in the north. Nightingale speculates that she might be skeptical of Roland's intentions, perhaps fearing that he, too, might take advantage of her. Given that she is nearly as beautiful as Iris, it's no surprise that the pub owner lusted after her. Roland assures Livy that he will contact Duke Calvin and arrange safe transport for her to Evernight City. Feeling deeply indebted to Roland's generosity, Livy expresses her gratitude and vows never to forget his kindness. As she turns to leave, Roland asks her one last question. Did she and Gerald have a child together? Unsurprisingly, Livy denies it. However, Nightingale can immediately tell that she is lying, and even Roland senses it. Livy does not seem particularly skilled at deception. This would explain why the pub owner was so persistent in harassing her. He likely knew of her connection to Gerald and suspected she had borne his child. He also understood that if Timothy discovered the child's existence, it would be doomed. To protect the last remnant of her love for Gerald, Livy had no choice but to obey the pub owner to keep him from exposing her secret. Nightingale suggests investigating the matter further, should Roland wish to pursue it. Roland considers her words and asks what she has in mind. In her response, she assures him she will do whatever he asks. For now, he simply tasks her with massaging his sore shoulders a little longer. The scene shifts to Zero and Isabella engaged in a private conversation. Isabella is visibly frustrated, lamenting how much of a nuisance Roland Wimbledon has become. She suggests that instead of focusing on the Kingdom of Dawn, they should prioritize Greycastle. The other pure witches can be left behind in order to handle the situation in the Kingdom of Dawn, ensuring their control remains intact. Zero, however, does not immediately respond. Instead, she gazes out of her tower window, observing the Holy City's citizens below. To her, they appear small and insignificant, mere ants slaving away without understanding why. In her eyes, even she is no different than a tiny and insignificant pawn in the eyes of God, destined to fight senselessly until her inevitable demise. Isabella, not catching up, presses her to get to the point. Zero finally elaborates that she believes she is one step closer to fulfilling God's will. All she needs to do is devour Greycastle's new king, and victory in the divine war will be assured. In her mind, Roland was sent as a challenge by God, and she intends to overcome it. Annoyed, Isabella attempts to bring Zero back to reality. She reminds her that their primary goal is survival. With their recent defeat, it is obvious they need to reassess their priorities. Even if they gather all of the church's forces and somehow manage to defeat Roland, the cost will be immense. His armies and witches will be annihilated, but so too will most of their divine punishment soldiers. Their real objective should be preparing for the incoming threat, the demons, who will arrive in less than 6 months. Zero challenges Isabella, asking what she proposes instead. Isabella suggests an alternative. Explain the truth to Roland Wimbledon. Tell him about the church's history, the 400-year-long alliance, and the real reason for their actions. Perhaps with understanding, he could be persuaded to work with them instead of against them. Zero scoffs at the idea. What if Roland refuses to believe them? She then further snaps at Isabella, reminding her that Roland is nothing more than a mortal, fragile, weak, and short-lived. His mind will deteriorate with age, and a simple illness could take his life at any moment. She refuses to entrust humanity's future to such a fleeting existence. To Zero, she alone is God's chosen warrior. She refuses to allow a mere mortal to stand at the same level as her. Isabella, realizing there is no changing Zero's mind, instead asks how she intends to defeat Roland. She reminds Zero that disabling the Stone of Divine Judgment requires close proximity. Additionally, the Alliance's high-tier sigils, which could aid them, are limited and can only be used once. If they use them now and fail, they will be left defenseless for the true battle ahead. Zero remains confident. She reminds Isabella of the thousands of souls she has devoured, proof of her strength. She urges Isabella to have a little faith in her abilities. After all, she is the only one capable of leading humanity to victory in the divine war. The scene shifts back to Blizzard Town, where Roland and his forces are conducting cannon tests. The devastating explosions cause Iron Axe to tense up. By now, he is convinced that no ordinary enemy could traverse the mountain paths under such fire. However, Roland reminds him that their enemies will not be ordinary. Worse still, their limited supply of ammunition poses a significant issue. If they had an unlimited stockpile, just 2 fortress cannons would be enough to wipe out the opposition. Meanwhile, Lightning is positioned near the impact site, marking the craters left by the cannon fire. She excitedly reports their successful hits, marveling at the sheer destructive power of the cannons. The sight fills her with renewed hope. They might actually stand a chance against the devils. As dusk settles, Roland returns to his camp, visibly anxious. Though they have done all they can to prepare, the final outcome is now left to fate. All he can do is wait. His thoughts are interrupted by Maggie, who arrives with an urgent report from the frontline defense. The church has finally made a move. The enemy has left its stronghold. It looks like everything is going according to Roland's expectations. Now, all that remains is rallying the First Army for the decisive battle. However, one lingering uncertainty remains, which is regarding the Pure Witches. Their role in the upcoming war is still unknown, and Roland has no way of predicting how they will be deployed. Well, it seems like Zero's plan is also going as she had intended. She too wanted Roland to come out and fight, just so she can get the chance to go near him. As Roland stands outside, wide awake and lost in his own thoughts, Nightingale and the others notice him and ask why he isn't sleeping. In response, he reveals that something seems to be under his sheets, and he always feels like something is poking him in the back. Andrea then recalls having the same feeling. There should have been at least 2 blankets underneath as cushioning, but it seems like the Northern Duke does not seem to know the meaning of hospitality. But Ash believes that just having a roof to shelter them from the cold nights is already more than one could ask for. So making these kinds of comfort-seeking complaints is inappropriate. While Ash and Andrea butt heads over the argument, Roland continues to gaze at the sky, anticipating the looming war ahead. He feels a little overwhelmed by the possibility of being unable to defeat the Church, but Nightingale tries to assure him that as long as she is alive, she won't let him get hurt. Later, on some random day, Roland receives a personal letter from the Pope. The letter serves no purpose other than roughly explaining the origins of the Church and mentioning the existence of devils. Nightingale wonders if they might be requesting a ceasefire through this. But Roland believes that if that were the case, the Holy City would have never tried to occupy Blizzard Town. Then again, they can't deny the validity of the letter either. After all, the handwriting in the letter is indeed the Pope's. For a moment, Roland entertains the possibility that this might be a scheme orchestrated by the Pure Witches. On one particularly sunny day, Lightning reports that the enemy has advanced to Sector 9. It seems like the Church is trying to launch an unexpected attack. Whatever the case, Knight Carter quickly alerts his soldiers to ready the cannons, as the enemy is right over their heads. Soon enough, the troops set up the cannons and begin blowing up the Church's soldiers, as if they were nothing more than bowling pins. Maggie and Lightning, acting as scouts, further report to the First Army that the enemy has passed Sector 12, so they order the soldiers to open fire. And so, the First Army begins bombarding the hell out of those zealous bastards marching toward them in numbers. But it looks like the First Army is about to run out of luck as they prepare to face a Pure Witch. This witch seems to have the power to control bugs because, with a single command, a swarm of insects begins to flood the battlefield. The horde of bugs coalesces into a giant monster. Seeing the threat before her, Lightning quickly pulls her goggles over her eyes, ready to engage, and instructs Maggie to keep providing coordinates to the artillery. Meanwhile, the foot soldiers steadily close the gap between themselves and the First Army, having already breached the 300-meter line. Now that the Church's soldiers are close enough, they start throwing spears at the First Army. The poor First Army soldiers begin dropping, while others get slaughtered in hand-to-hand combat. Roland, meanwhile, watches the entire battle unfold from a safe distance atop a watchtower. Some of the enemies have breached the first 3 trenches and are already advancing toward the 4th. But judging from the retreating enemy vanguard and their reinforced defenses, the Divine Punishment Army's assault is clearly weakening. If this keeps up, they won't be able to touch the remaining 5 trenches and artillery squads. Then suddenly Sylvie notices something shocking. The ground beneath the First Army soldiers is sinking, all thanks to Vale, who pops right out of the ground. She uses her magic to control the soldiers, forcing them to take their own lives. This absolutely shocks the hell out of Roland. He is so stunned that probably the most shocked we've ever seen him. Meanwhile, the First Army soldiers manage to take down one of the witches who summoned the insects. She gets riddled with bullets, making her death inevitable, and thus, she falls in a pool of her own blood. Zero grits her teeth at the losses she's facing. She absolutely did not account for this many casualties before launching this surprise attack. She can't afford to lose this time. She meticulously prepared for this day. She even made sure to infect the letter with some kind of powder, and she's certain that if Roland touched it, he must be infected by now. You see, this powder has a scent that mortals can't detect, and it can seep into the skin as well. Once Vanilla, one of the Pure Witches, activates her ability, they will be able to pinpoint Roland's position in the crowd. While her plan is thorough, she still seems to have underestimated the strength of his snow powder weapons. His weapons were able to attack from miles away, severely injuring her forces before they even reached the perimeter. And Vale can only buy them limited time with her abilities. Vanilla quickly reports that the barrier concealing their presence is about to collapse. She can't hold it together any longer. Eventually, the cube they were in suddenly explodes, and all the witches inside are revealed. Zero quickly gestures for Vale to clear the way, and Vale follows the command without hesitation. But as she marches, she begins to fear that she might not survive this. Anyhow, while Vale occupies the soldiers in front, Zero signals Isabella to perform her role as well. Right away, Isabella activates her magic ability, known as Infinity. The blinding light not only throws everyone off guard, but it also nullifies all the divine stones of judgment. Now the stage is completely set for Zero to make her move. She zips past all of the soldiers and appears right in front of Roland. As soon as she tags Roland with her powers, he finds himself inside the virtual world she created. The place he falls into is his school. Of course, none of this makes sense to Roland as to why the hell is he seeing his school. For a moment he wonders if he's dreaming. Then he considers the possibility that he has somehow returned to his own world. But if he really did return to his home planet, then why is he still occupying the 4th prince's body? Then he spots Zero standing behind him and immediately recognizes her as one of the pure witches from the church. But in her introduction, Zero makes sure to add that she is also the 15th Pope of the Holy City of Hermes, and her name is Zero. And given how strange this place is, she's certain that he is definitely not Roland Wimbledon. Roland asks if she created this place, to which she claims that he is the one who did. This place is buried deep in his memories and appears frequently in his daily life. She is very, very curious to know what exactly this place is. After all, the 4th Prince of Grey Castle absolutely never lived in a place like this. But Roland doesn't feel the need to tell her anything. He starts analyzing his situation. He's not sure what to do to escape this illusion. Based on past experiences with nightmares, jumping from a high place would normally wake him up. Meanwhile, Zero is confident that she'll learn everything there is to know about Roland sooner or later. Who he is, where he came from, and why he became the 4th Prince of Grey Castle. Everything will become clear to her once this is over. Usually she explains to her opponents all about her illusion, its effects, its rules, and the impact of her ability. But this time, she decides to keep her mouth shut. With that said, she stabs the hell out of Roland. But even after dying, Roland finds himself back, with no wounds at all, though the ground is still stained with the blood he lost. He's trying to figure out where that sword she summoned came from, and how he's even alive again. Zero charges at him once more and delivers a slash that kills him instantly. And once again, he spawns back. By now he's sure he's not in some twisted nightmare. If it were, killing himself would have let him escape it. It feels more like an eternal battlefield. And if he's thinking right, there must be some conditions he needs to fulfill to leave. If she can summon weapons out of nowhere, he wonders if he can do that too. So, when Zero jumps at him for another strike, Roland imagines a shield in front of him to save himself. An invincible barrier appears just in time, blocking the direct hit. Now that he's figured out he can conjure anything by imagining it, he pulls out guns and starts bombarding her with bullets. But that's still not enough to defeat her. She appears right behind him and kills him on the spot. Roland is back again, and she can't help but commend him for the unique perception he's showing. She's quite astonished at how he figured out her illusions without needing any prior explanation. And the weapons he's summoning are pretty interesting. She's never seen anything like the lump of metal he's conjured. His creations are indeed terrifying, but she makes it clear they're not as threatening to her. She's been watching him the whole time, while he's never been able to notice her actions. In all these years, she's devoured countless warriors, including transcendental witches. There's no way a mere mortal like Roland could win. Suddenly, Roland conjures a little box right in front of her eyes. It explodes on her face, causing her to die instantly. But of course, she respawns. As Roland stands tall after figuring out how to fight with her, he calls her out for her filthy tactics. He doesn't like how she makes her opponents despair and concede defeat, just so she can steal all their knowledge. But Zero isn't fazed by his righteous ramblings. She just suggests that Roland admit defeat if he knows this much. That's when Roland summons Optimus Prime to attack her. But this sassy woman suddenly appears right behind him and slits his throat with her dagger. The back and forth continues, and every time she kills him, she demands he concede defeat. She points out how he's losing stamina and mental strength, and if this keeps up, he won't be able to achieve anything except suffering. Hearing this, Roland realizes that she's continuing to pressure him to give up, even though she could just keep attacking him. This only means her stamina is running low as well. But as if Zero heard his thoughts, she reveals that worrying about stamina is the last thing on her mind. She has enough stamina to die over 100 times, so Roland's basically making things harder for himself by not conceding. Roland begins to weigh his options. He thinks about ways to trap her, like caging her, using proximity mines, or maybe electric field lasers. But then again, none of these things would truly trap her. Just like she said, if he can't restrict her movements, he'll definitely lose. Roland then asks her how many battles she's fought in the past 2 years. She claims it's probably 1,000 or more, though not many have impressed her. Their wills were stronger than Roland's, but they still lost to countless deaths, and not many chose to endure the hopeless defeat. She reminds him once again that continuing this torture is pointless. Meanwhile, Roland rhetorically asks her if no one has ever defeated her in those 1,000 battles. He wonders if there's really no one mentally stronger than her. No one who won by creating lava or oceans. Zero reiterates what she had said. Even if she had been defeated, she wouldn't be standing here now. She further points out that even if someone tries to change the surface they're standing on, it would deplete their mental stamina so much that it would be like suicide. No one could ever change the entire world like this. Only a god with omnipotent strength could pull off something like that. Roland responds by saying that gods don't exist in his world. Zero then questions if he concedes defeat, especially since he has no way to turn the tides in his favor. But Roland refuses to quit, not without trying one last time. He wants to try once more, and if he fails, he'll concede. Hearing this, Zero readies a sword crackling with intense energy, prepared to give Roland the final blow. But that's when Roland pulls out his biggest trick. He makes the ground beneath her unbelievably slippery, so slippery she can't move an inch. She's left confused, wondering what in the world he just did. Roland smirks and boasts about making a minor adjustment to the battlefield. Without the support of friction, her speed doesn't matter. She won't be able to move at all. To educate her further, he explains the law of motion. When an external force isn't acting on an object, it will remain static, just like she is right now. This phenomenon is known as Newton's first law. After rendering her a defenseless husk who can't even move, Roland produces a bunch of machine guns and begins bombarding the hell out of Zero. The scorching heat burns her alive over and over. But more than the pain, what hurts her most is the fact that she's getting her ass whooped. She refuses to believe that he's able to create something that doesn't exist, and that what he says is true. Roland then breaks it to her that he simply altered the atomic distribution of the floor. The atoms are now tightly packed together, neat and organized like soldiers. The surface is incredibly slippery and tough, so tough that even the hardest diamond would be like marshmallow in comparison. So, it's basically over for her. As Roland intensifies the scorching flames, making her die over and over again, we shift to the real world, where Nightingale is watching over Roland's unconscious body. Tears well up in her eyes as she thinks it's her fault. She failed to protect him. Just then, lightning appears and reports that the pure witch is awake, meaning it's finally time to interrogate her and get all the secrets she knows. Along with Nightingale and Lightning, Agatha joins them. As they walk through the corridor, Lightning points out how the witch woke up by herself, sitting on the bed when Ash was checking on her. She also said that this prison is meaningless to her. Once they reach the room, they hear Isabella muttering about how Zero seems to have completely lost, even though she was supposed to be a spoiled god's child. Nightingale is intrigued to hear the mention of a god's child. Isabella, on the other hand, is willing to share everything she knows, and she's ready to accept whatever they decide for her. She starts by explaining her abilities. She can disable the effect of the stones of divine judgment, and no amount of stones can stop her if they're within her range. But otherwise, she can't go through walls or dig underground, so they don't need to prepare any special rooms for her. Hearing this, Nightingale deduces that she must have been the one who disabled Roland's stone. Isabella admits to this, saying she had no other choice, as Zero was already blinded by God. She believed that only on the battlefield could one receive the smile of God. She further reveals that Zero used the battlefield of souls on Roland. The Battle of Souls is essentially a fight of wills and consciousness. The loser surrenders everything and the winner takes it all. Ever since Zero awakened as a witch, she's never lost on the battlefield. She's devoured over 1,000 mortals and witches, absorbing their memories, knowledge, and lifespan. She's lived for 200 years. However, Isabella never expected Zero to lose to a mere mortal prince. But since Roland has won, Nightingale asks why Roland hasn't woken up yet. Isabella reveals that the outcome of the battlefield of souls should have been decided instantly. If Roland didn't turn into Zero on the spot, that means Zero failed to devour him. This means Roland can't wake up because he can't handle such a gigantic memory. Basically, Isabella has no clue when he might wake up because there's never been a precedent for this. She can't explain it. But there was one time when Zero had devoured Garcia, that Zero was completely exhausted for a while. She recalls finding some interesting details in Garcia's memory, so she spent more effort than usual to process them all. It might also be that Roland is trying to absorb Zero's memories, and he needs more time to do that. As long as he's alive, he will eventually wake up. Hearing this, Nightingale gets scared when she considers the possibility that Roland might not be able to handle the 200 years worth of memories. In the worst-case scenario, he might never wake up. Pushing this aside, Nightingale and Agatha continue interrogating Isabella about the church and how much she knows about the Alliance. Isabella claims that the letter they sent contained everything regarding the Witch Empire and the Devils, but Agatha reveals that the letter wasn't particularly useful to them, since they already know that much. She herself is a witch from the Alliance. Of course, Isabella is shocked to hear this, so Agatha decides to make it easier for her by explaining. Agatha is from the holy city of Tequila, from 400 years ago, and she's seen its destruction firsthand. Devils aren't exactly rare. They have camps in the misty forest to the west of Grey Castle, as well as at the end of the Redwater River. Furthermore, Roland has already fought those devils once. What Agatha really wants to know is how the Alliance became the church. Isabella then reveals that the records mentioned there was a conflict within the Alliance during the escape. It happened on the northwestern side of the mountains. There weren't many details, but the Alliance split into two factions. One group mostly consisted of Tequila witches who were attuned to enter the labyrinth ruins in the mountains. The other group consisted of witches from Comet City, who wanted to keep heading north, uphold Lady Alice's will, and settle in the Hermes Mountains. These witches became the church. Hearing this, Agatha is shocked to realize it was basically an internal war among the witches while they were on the run. which was nothing more than suicide. Isabella further reveals that it was also to kill the non-combat witches who didn't belong to Comet City, because that was the only way for the church to bury the history. If it hadn't been for the internal conflict among the witches, the Four Kingdoms wouldn't have been able to escape the Alliance's control. However, it also meant that the church couldn't have as many divine punishment soldiers. So, the church buried the past to make capturing witches easier and create mindless divine punishment soldiers. In Nightingale's eyes, it's all madness. It's like every witch in the church went insane. But Isabella reveals that she never cared about who controlled the continent. Her only wish was to defeat the devils. After all, this is the whole reason the Alliance was created. Zero was incredibly deranged. But her beliefs were stronger than anyone else's when it came to defeating the devils, and that's why Isabella decided to help her. After hearing all of this twisted information, Nightingale draws her daggers, ready to kill this piece of shit on the spot. But Agatha manages to calm Nightingale down, explaining that killing Isabella won't solve their immediate problems. It looks like there's also another interesting tidbit Isabella wants to share. Zero did allow pure witches to read the text in the Holy Temple, but absolutely no one except for her was allowed to reach the prayer room on the top floor, because whoever stands there can directly face God. Later, we see Nightingale releasing her frustration by punching the wall after getting no leads on how to wake Roland. Agatha reminds her that they've already done all they can, so all they can do now is wait. No matter what, they should tell everyone what they've learned. As for Isabella, she tries to assure Nightingale that killing her won't benefit anyone, as she's still a very useful asset to them. Nightingale then heads back to Roland's room to check on him, but before entering she spots Anna beside him, so Nightingale retreats into her mist. While Roland may be unconscious, as long as he's alive, Anna is willing to keep waiting for him to wake up. A day, a year, or even her lifetime, she will stay by his side forever as long as he's still breathing. So she wishes him to sleep soundly. Meanwhile, Nightingale can do nothing but shed her tears as she watches this. I'm not sure if she's crying because of Roland's miserable state or because Anna might be his true love. A while later, Roland wakes up in his bed. He's spooked to find himself in the bed out of nowhere, because the last thing he remembers is standing in the thick of battle with Zero. Since he doesn't want to lose, he tries to summon more guns to keep fighting. But soon he realizes that nothing is happening, which makes him believe that the rules of the game have changed. Roland takes note of how this place is entirely unfamiliar to him. It doesn't resemble anything he has seen in his previous life, or the life he had in the border town. Confused, he runs through the space and enters another room. He notices a collection of mysterious books, none of which he remembers owning, either in his current life or his previous one. The TV in the room is on, broadcasting a news report. It states that last night, an unknown explosion occurred at the city university. A lecture building was completely destroyed, and the roof had collapsed. This shocks Roland. He was supposed to be in a fictional world of illusions, so how is he back in his previous world? Rushing to the balcony, he looks out at the bustling streets below, only to realize that nothing resembles the previous world he lived in. As he stands there, a woman appears in the corridor and starts berating him for blocking the way. Roland eventually returns to the room and immediately demands Zero to come out and fight him. But no matter how much he yells, no one appears. He sits down, deep in thought. If this is another illusion from the Battle of Souls, then there must be a way to escape. He decides to use one of the oldest tricks in the book, stacking tables and chairs on top of each other. He figures that jumping from a height might jolt him back to reality. But just as he's about to do so, a little girl enters the room, calling him Uncle. She looks almost exactly like a younger version of Zero. The sight catches Roland completely off guard, and he loses his balance, slipping and falling. And then he wakes up. He finds himself back in his bed in Neverwinter. Anna, who had been watching over him, is absolutely shocked to see him awake. Overwhelmed with emotions, she rushes to him and embraces him passionately. Roland gives her a reassuring pat and apologizes for making her worry so much. He then asks how long he had been unconscious. He guesses maybe 3 days, or at worst a week. But Anna breaks it to him that it has been almost 2 months. To be specific, 1 month and 22 days. Roland is stunned. He quickly asks how he even survived that long without food or water. Anna explains that Twilight, one of the Bloodfang witches, has an ability that allowed her to plant a leech seed in him. All she had to do was eat an extra meal every day, and all the nutrients were absorbed into Roland's body. Roland finds this fascinating. But what amazes him even more is that, despite being in a coma for so long, he doesn't feel any fatigue or muscle soreness. He expresses his gratitude to Anna for taking care of him all this time, but Anna brushes it off. To her, whatever she did for him is nothing compared to what he has done for everyone. He has already fulfilled the promise he made to the witches, the promise to eradicate the church's armies. Every witch in the Union is indebted to him. Any of them would have gladly sacrificed themselves for his safety. Even if he wasn't here, there would be plenty of people willing to take care of him. But Roland only wants her to be his caretaker. Just when Roland is in the perfect mood to play clap-clap, Anna suddenly remembers that everyone has been eagerly waiting for him to wake up. She reminds him that he has just regained consciousness and should focus on recovering first. Roland insists that he's already strong enough to clap her, but Anna bonks him on the head and runs out before he can say anything else. As she heads out to call the others, Roland's mind drifts back to the moment in his dream, when he saw Zero as a child, calling him Uncle. It's a mystery to him why she said that. Even stranger, he has never lived in the city he saw in his dreams. Before disappearing, Zero had also hysterically screamed that she would never let him go. He isn't sure if her words were a curse or something else entirely. Anyhow, he is sure that there is something he has yet to figure out. He is soon jolted out of his thoughts when all the Witch Association members enter his chamber to meet him. While everyone expresses their relief at seeing Roland alive, Agatha makes sure to scan him for any traces of magic, and thankfully, she finds nothing. She then asks if he remembers anything, like Zero's memories. Hearing this, Roland questions how she knows that he holds Zero's memories. In response, Agatha explains that one of the pure witches they captured had already spilled all the beans. Ash also considers the possibility that his mind might be scrambled by 200 years of memories, making his previous personality fade away in a sea of new ones. So, she wants Roland to prove that he is actually Roland and not Zero. Nightingale confirms that the person before them is indeed Roland. Then his sister also meets him, expressing her relief and welcoming him back. Later, Iron Axe, the old man Parov, and that priest guy in charge of infrastructure also pay him a visit in his office. While Roland was in a coma, there were no abnormalities in the city, though some people did panic. Roland believes that improving public morale is the most important task right now, so he wants them to spread the news that their king is still alive. He wants the message out by tonight, followed by a grand banquet at the castle. As dusk settles, the streets are decorated in celebration, and food is being distributed for free. We then cut back to Roland, where Nightingale also arrives, hesitant to make eye contact with him. After all, she had failed to save him. But Roland assures her that she is not to blame as it was clearly not her fault. He then hugs her warmly and expresses his gratitude for the great job she had done on the battlefield. As the night deepens, Roland heads back to bed to get some sleep. But as soon as he closes his eyes, he is once again transported to that annoying dream from before. And just like last time, he spots little Zero, still calling him Uncle. She wants to know why he was acting strange yesterday. She sets breakfast on the table and tells him to eat. Roland is seriously spooked, experiencing this weird dream all over again, and wants to end it right away. So he grabs a knife and decides to kill her. But before he can act, little Zero starts berating him for yesterday's antics. She wants to know why he had been standing on the furniture. Did he spot some roaches on the ground or something? Roland lies, saying he was trying to clean the dirty ceiling. But the little one isn't buying it. If he really wanted to clean the roof, a wet rag attached to a tall stick would have been the easiest way to do it. Besides, why the sudden urge to clean when she's been the one handling the chores ever since she arrived? The mention of her just arriving catches Roland off guard. The girl, on the other hand, demands that he cough up some money for groceries. The fridge is almost empty, so she has to go to the market today. Roland begins rummaging through clothes he's not even wearing. Tired of her uncle's unusual behavior, the girl reminds him that the money is in the drawer. So Roland finally starts going through the table and eventually finds his wallet. He asks how much she needs and she demands $20. Only because she can't carry more groceries than that, though. Instead, he gives her $50 and tells her to use the leftover for next time. She takes the $50. That's when he notices her index finger wrapped in a bandage. When he asks about it, she responds that she got cut while picking up glass shards. With that, she heads off to school. She won't be coming home for lunch, so he'll have to do the dishes today. But he quickly reminds her that it's already summer vacation. To this, she replies that she's going to cram school. As she leaves, she suggests that he go to the hospital if his head still hurts. On her way out of the apartment building, Roland notices her greeting her friends that are her age. Not gonna lie, the more he searches for answers, the more complicated this whole thing gets. For a moment he considers following her. It's then that Roland spots Garcia Wimbledon walking down the corridor. His instincts kick in, and he prepares himself, knife in hand. Garcia merely requests that he step aside so she can pass through. Seeing this, Roland asks her if she doesn't recognize him. Garcia simply sneers at his strange question and continues on her way. Roland, undeterred, asks her to confirm if her name is Garcia. Upon hearing her name, Garcia quickly spins on her feet and throws a fist at his face. Though she doesn't know how he knows her name, she warns him that if he keeps this up, things won't end well for him. With that little threat, she barges into her apartment, numbered 0827. Roland notices that the apartment number has 3 digits, and the corridor stretches on endlessly, lined with a plethora of apartment rooms. As he thinks about it, he recalls how Zero once claimed to have devoured thousands of warriors, one of whom was even a transcendent witch. That basically means all the residents living here are those she's devoured. By now, Roland has no doubt that Zero created all of this, but he wonders if it was her intention. He still doesn't understand why she would create such a bizarre dream realm where she doesn't even recognize herself as a pure witch, instead role-playing as a middle school student. It's pretty obvious that this modern environment has to do with his own memories, but he's not sure what role he's supposed to play in all this. He knows he isn't supposed to be in this building of the defeated people. After all, he still has all of his memories, and he's aware that he's dreaming, so he can leave this place at any time. Since his head is slightly throbbing from falling last time, it suggests that the dream feels incredibly real. If that's the case, he wants to figure out just how far this dream goes in terms of realism. Roland heads back to his bedroom and then takes a look into his storage room. Afterward, he enters Zero's room, where he finds a diary. He opens it and starts reading a few illustrations she's drawn of herself and him, mostly writing about day-to-day life. February 16th is the day she moved between schools and was eventually assigned to live here. The landlord's name is Roland, and he's not very orderly. She writes that he works at a bar and always smells of alcohol. She doesn't like this place, but her parents said it was the cheapest apartment. They told her she'd have to go back to the countryside if she complained. Roland is creeped out by all the nonsense she's written, but he continues to read nonetheless. On February 27th, her school started, and at the same time, Roland lost his job. He now only eats instant ramen for dinner. By March 2nd, he used up all his allowance on ramen, so she had to talk to him about it. On March 3rd, he agreed to her suggestion and decided to give her a bit of money every month to buy fresh groceries. By March 8th, she had started to get used to living here. The final note, from June 25th, mentions how terrified she was when she saw Roland fall from a chair as she came in, but at least the sofa absorbed his fall. Roland finally shuts the diary and begins piecing things together. It seems like everyone in this dream world has a backstory that fits the modern setting. However, all these stories are quite complicated, and he probably doesn't have the mental capacity to create them. He also notices a few textbooks. From the cover, he can tell he used these books in middle school. The book he's currently looking at is chemistry. Seeing the periodic table inside, Roland gets excited to read it, especially since it could help him refresh his knowledge. But as soon as he attempts to read it, everything begins to distort, and he wakes up in reality. After entering the dream world twice, Roland has finally figured out some sort of pattern. The first thing he noticed is that the passage of time is not the same as in reality. If he spends 8 hours in the dream world and then wakes up, it's still nighttime in the real world. The second thing is his brain activity. Maybe it's because the dream is so realistic, and when he acts in the dream, he doesn't have time to sleep or rest, which is a major challenge for him, as he'll always be sleep-deprived at this rate. If he can use the time difference and rest while dreaming, he's sure it will make things much more efficient. Thirdly, the dream world itself. He's not sure if this place even has an end or any boundaries, or how many fragments of memory it contains. Lastly, he wants to figure out how much hidden or forgotten information he will be able to discover here. The next day, in the conference room, Roland holds a meeting with all the government representatives. Now that the threat of the church is gone, there's no question they need to prepare for the devils. Neverwinter will have to devote all their efforts to the upcoming divine war. This means they'll need to direct their attention toward the other kingdoms as well. They'll have to recruit the Everwinter and Wolfheart kingdoms to combat the devil threat. Though Barov is concerned it won't be that easy. Roland points out that the news of the church's fall will undoubtedly spread across the entire continent, and he wouldn't be surprised if some church-affiliated aristocrats retaliate. However, this is a good opportunity for Neverwinter. It doesn't matter if it takes money or military strength to deal with the rebelling aristocrats, they just need to pull everyone into Grey Castle. Moreover, with the arrival of next spring, the Neverwinter seaport will also be put into use. Barov's task is to formulate a recruitment plan, rent ships from the bay merchants, and find places to accommodate the newcomers in the city. Additionally, Roland officially incorporates Iris Candle into the city hall, appointing her as the vice head of the department. While Barov is grateful for Roland's consideration, he is confident he can handle this on his own. However, Roland makes it clear that his decision has already been made. He then shifts his attention to Sister Scroll, since education will also play a major role in their preparations. Roland asks her how the training is progressing for intermediate-level teachers. The girl reveals that only Ferlin has passed the exam so far, and she worries that this might not work out. Roland gives her permission to choose new intermediate teachers from the student pool to encourage the top students to continue their studies at school. He also suggests adding scholarships, reward systems, and advises her to work alongside Ferlin to figure it out. Once the students pass the exams, they'll be able to become intermediate teachers and receive a monthly salary of 50 silvers. Scroll is unsure if spending this much to gather intermediate teachers is necessary, but Roland has a bigger picture in mind. Becoming a teacher won't be the only future they can choose. They will also have the freedom to enter any field or industry they like. After all, an educated population is useless if they can't be utilized, so funneling them into industries they're suited for is an important step. Furthermore, Roland plans to write a curriculum for introductory logic and critical thinking for her soon. For now, he tells her she's free to go. After dismissing the meeting, Roland asks Kyle Sichi to accompany him to the office. Once Sichi enters the office, he quickly expresses his desire to leave if Roland doesn't have any new ideas for production to share. Roland tells him to relax and take a seat, as he has something important to give him. First, Roland asks if Sichi has ever considered becoming the director of the chemical manufacturing department. Of course, Sichi responds with a resounding no, as he has no interest in abandoning the vials and jars in his laboratory for pointless management responsibilities. But Roland asks him to listen before making any hasty decisions. He acknowledges Sichi's devotion to chemistry, driven by his desire to learn its secrets, and his unwillingness to spend time on anything else. However, Roland promises him that he can help him uncover the very essence of chemistry. This much is enough to get Sichi interested. Roland finally places the periodic table in front of Sichi. Roland promises to give him the periodic table permanently if he accepts the director's position. If he performs well in the role, Roland further promises to send him a complete version of intermediate chemistry. Unsurprisingly, Kyle Sichi takes the deal. Roland wishes him the best of luck, confident that the history of chemistry will bear Sichi's name. We then cut to Isabella's prison cell, where she has been held captive for almost 2 months. Roland has not come to see her, and it's driving her crazy. Though the amenities provided to her don't make it feel like a traditional prison, she has no freedom. She writes down everything she knows, hoping that Roland might spare her when he reads it. And then, the moment arrives. Roland comes to meet her on this fateful day. Isabella is astonished that he is finally here. The first question Roland asks is if she is Isabella, the witch who dismantled the stone of divine judgment he was wearing. Isabella makes sure to show proper respect, while Roland, on the other hand, has a lot of questions for her. The most pressing one is why the results of his battle with Zero weren't like she had described. Being the winner of the challenge, Roland didn't exactly inherit everything. Isabella finds this impossible. Roland has a hunch that he's not a witch, which is why he's unable to inherit Zero's knowledge. Isabella then elaborates, the sole prize in the battlefield of souls is memory and lifespan. Since mortals already possess these two things, they can inherit them from others through this challenge. However, witches' abilities can't be absorbed, because magic can't simply be spliced onto someone else. Otherwise, Zero would have devoured her long ago. But since Roland is the first case she's seen where he didn't absorb a single piece of memory, it's a curious situation. Roland then asks her if Zero ever mentioned where the defeated go. She reveals that the losers always disappear completely as if they never existed. Roland presses further, asking if there's a difference in the results of the challenge if someone voluntarily surrenders or resists until the end. Isabella claims that all of them disappear. However, Zero once said that there were 2 types of memories she could absorb. One type was disorganized, with residual consciousness from the losers, which would affect Zero herself. The other type was fully complete, allowing Zero to examine every last detail. It seems Roland has figured something out. He decides to put this topic aside for now and focus on Isabella herself. Roland tells her to be grateful for her ability, not because it's particularly unique, but because it can't be used to directly harm someone. No matter what she's done, even though she aided Zero in attacking him, she is no more than an accomplice. Therefore, he won't execute her, but she must pay for her crimes, just like everyone else who has broken the law. Isabella falls to her knees, willing to accept any punishment necessary as long as Roland defeats the devils. Roland reminds her that devils are the enemies of all humans, and of course, he will fight them to the end. However, he won't go about it the way the church would have. He won't waste the potential of humanity in winning the divine war. He wants her to change the habits she had in the church. Isabella clings to the ground, saying she's willing to adhere to any command Roland has for her. Roland is startled by her submissive behavior. He quickly orders her to get up, telling her this is not Hermes, so she doesn't have to act like a servant. Here, all she needs to do is help Agatha in her research on magic. Furthermore, there will be no concept of pure witches, and she will be called the Repenting Witch from this point onward. Before Roland leaves, Isabella asks him about her friends, Vanilla and Mary. Roland assures her that they are being treated better than she is. With that, he leaves. Isabella is left staring out the window. Seeing the beautiful day, she cracks a smile as if she's finally found the salvation she's been seeking. Later, Nightingale complains to Roland about how easily he let Isabella get away, even though she almost killed him. Roland reminds her that it was Zero who almost killed him. Isabella merely made it possible. Since Isabella didn't do anything unforgivable, and most importantly, he didn't suffer any permanent damage, he wants to leave the matter as it is. She will be a good PR example. Her case will help people understand that crimes can be repented and forgiven, as long as they aren't too severe. After all, devils are the greatest enemies, and using Isabella's abilities to bolster their chances at victory is the best form of redemption. Nightingale finally relents, deciding to keep an eye on her. As Roland stands